Cool. So today we are talking about Denial of Death by Ernest Becker. Did anybody have anything that they wanted to start off with?
I had a couple of notes just to get us started here.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're necessarily like a good introduction to the book. Did you want to start by summarizing the book?
Yeah.
You read?
Yeah, that sounds good. Go for it.
Oh, okay. Well, I can tell you that I made it through about half the Kierkegaard section, so that's as far as I can summarize. But basically, let's see. The thesis of the book is that it's kind of like a post-Freudian review of psychoanalysis, some of Freud's themes, and it kind of focuses around the human condition and the human character as it relates to our knowledge of ourselves and of death, the terror of existence. So we read part one of the book, which kind of reviews a lot of those themes. It talks about anality, edible complex, castration fear, the primal scene, and it kind of updates some of Freud's thinking with some of the more recent thinking. Specifically, Otto Rank is one of his biggest influences, and this book was kind of credited with bringing Otto Rank's philosophy back into fashion. I don't know. Somebody else take it from there.
So that's the recasting of some basic psychoanalytic ideas. There's some stuff in the beginning about what a hero is, or like how we view heroes. Early heroes were those who conquered death. I don't know. It was interesting to me in the beginning because having a child, and there's a lot about raising a child and childhood development, and I mean, it kind of made me wonder, like, can you raise a child without a fear of death? How much flexibility is there in the human condition, or is it sort of deterministic that you'll end up in this kind of Freudian picture?
Well, that's what I was going to ask you first, Michael. Actually, was like your perspectives of this as a new father. I guess like your child is very, very young, so maybe he's not encountering a lot of this stuff yet. But I think they start by saying that there's two frames of mind. There's the healthy-minded perspective, which is that children are born without a natural fear of death and acquire it, and the morbidly minded perspective, which is kind of the worm at the core. Everybody has a natural fear of death that's unavoidable.
Yeah.
But is the thesis of this book. Like he really just explores that mindset, admits to that, that he's really just looking at it from that perspective. So from his perspective, no, can't really avoid it because it's always there. It's present in all humans, it's part of the natural condition.
Yeah, I guess I don't really see how you can say that it's present in something that clearly is not capable of demonstrating it. Like my baby is, all it does is like scream when it's uncomfortable and eat and poop. And it's like, I don't think you could say that there is a fear of death. I think it has to be something that you develop as you age. Although you could go one of two ways, and you could either say that it's unavoidable and that you're just sort of like, breaking through to the next phase of human development, which is a fear of death. Or you could say that it's like a learned thing from experience, which I guess begs the question, like, can you raise a child, like I said, without a fear of death if like you do it perfectly?
No, you don't want to.
I want to. I want to create a Nietzschean master. None of this slave morality shit.
No, but how is that not, like, even a master is not someone who is not conscious of death. That's like with courage, someone who has no fear has no courage.
Right.
Even to go back to the Greeks, how can you say that they have no fear of death?
Right.
The whole point is you face it heroically. Society gives you a system through which you transcend death.
Do you think that there's any like variance in how people develop this fear of death? Do some people get it earlier? Do some people get it more strongly? Like,
what he brought up was eating. You see the way, like, a child lives in a magical world. Your child right now is in a magical world where just the smallest sound or utterance on their part, rallies all sorts of forces around them to give them what they want,
right,
and serve them.
Right. And if he willed it, he could kill me too.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure. I'm not even sure you exist as like a thing separate from him.
Yeah, I definitely don't. I'm like a very clumsy appendage in his view. Like I'm something that he controls, but he doesn't control me very well, and I think that's frustrating. And that's about as far as he's gotten.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I don't know. I thought that was really interesting, though. I told Amy, and she didn't really like it, that like the child ends up thinking that they have all these godly powers and that they could if you frustrate them, they could kill you, and then that gives them like a guilt complex.
Yeah. They don't. They. What am I hearing there?
Oh, I think we can hear Eddie and somebody in your background.
Yeah, I'll just mute myself when I'm not talking. My roommate's watching a movie loudly.
Oh.
He
should join. I thought he was a philosophy student.
Oh, he claims to be. He always declined to read with us.
Okay.
Sorry, Nathan, you were saying something.
He's too good for us. No, I was just going to say that in terms of death, from certain developmental literature I've read, you don't really start to contemplate your own death until like around 7 is where it really starts, like where most kids it hits that, oh, I'm going to die, or you don't think unavoidable that
you don't think that anality represents death, that the unpleasant shit that you make is I don't know, symbolic?
No, that's pleasurable. That's just you. It's like, isn't part of Freud the whole fact, or like society, kind of steps in to like make that thing which isn't exactly naturally disgusting, like, because kids like to play around with that, right?
Well, yeah, at a certain point, but I think before that, when they're even younger, it bothers them because they're sitting in it and it's very uncomfortable, and I don't know if they can smell it, but
yeah, you get the rash.
That might be a little too Freudian. I don't know. I mean, it was funny to read how Freud was famous for developing infant sexuality, which is my favorite term, and would cast things through that lens pretty frequently.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I can safely say at the age of 1 month, there is no concept of personhood, either himself or anybody around him.
Oh yeah. He's not even at the mirror stage, right?
Yeah, I showed him himself in a mirror, and he didn't have any reaction.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I mean, there's something. Let me read this. The child emerges with a name, a family, a play world, and a neighborhood, all clearly cut out for him, but his insides are full of nightmarish memories of impossible battles, terrifying anxieties of blood, pain, aloneness, darkness, mixed with limitless desires, sensations of unspeakable beauty, majesty, awe, mystery, and fantasies, and hallucinations of mixture between the two, the impossible attempt to compromise between bodies and symbols. So basically, the child emerges actualized, but with the memory of these symbols he could not understand. So I don't know. It's basically, I think, saying that he ends up with this, I don't know, blueprint of what it means to be a human that's then like revealed, I guess, that he deciphers much later and uses it to, I guess, as like a map. But at the time, it doesn't make any sense. I don't know. What do you guys think about like very, very, very early childhood experiences? Like, do you think you remember that stuff? Do you think they have an impact on you?
I would be surprised if they didn't have any sort of impact. I definitely don't think. I think there's just, we know about child psychology, but we don't really remember anything other than around 4 years old or something like that. So I have no memory of my own.
What's your earliest memory?
I have a historically poor memory. I think of some stuff around kindergarten, maybe a couple things around preschool age, but certainly nothing younger than 4 years old.
Yeah. What about you, Nathan?
I just have like distinct like scenes in memory. I don't know which one's actually like the oldest. I've never tried to like track it back.
Yeah.
I just have, especially like my childhood house in north of Vancouver, Washington, just outside of Battleground, got a lot of images of like, going through, I remember going on with my father, like we were hunting frogs, like in kind of the local, it's actually like a field, or it was a field, but I guess it was also kind of marshy. But there was like frogs, and we'd like travel through the woods, to get, and then you come out on the other side, like kind of down the hill. And yeah, it's all kind of like nature for me.
How old do you think you were?
I mean, somewhere around 3 to 5.
Okay.
Preschool, but
there was this. There's this other quote, like a page later. This is book 3, the recasting, and it's anality explains why some men. Anality explains why men yearn for freedom from contradictions and ambiguities, why they like their symbols pure, their truth with a capital T. So, and as somebody who clearly likes their truth with a capital T, I'm wondering, do you think that anality is kind of what leads to like this pursuit of objectivism? I guess not Ayn Rand objectivism, but just objective reality.
Yeah, I'm not. So when I read that, I thought of just like how we're much more comfortable with things that are like fit neatly into boxes. It makes us really uncomfortable when things are extremely nuanced or not easily defined or labeled. I don't entirely understand the link between anality and that concept. You want to kind of...
Yeah, Mike, I got to be honest, I don't understand anality at all. I mean, I understand there's something about like kids liking their own poop, but and kind of a fascination with our own like crap.
There's 2 ways it can go. I think this was Freud. is you can either be anal retentive or anal expulsive. And if you're anal expulsive, then you like to you get pleasure from pooping, and that leads to, I think, a personality where you need to like impress yourself upon the world. Like you, I don't know. I would probably just be speculating at this point. The other one is anal retentive, where you try to keep it in. You try to prevent pooping. And anal. I mean, you probably know a bunch of people that are anal retentive, and they. It seems like those. It almost seems to me like those are the people that like everything clearly defined. Like people that are very comfortable, expelling feces onto things. It messes them up. It makes things dirty. It breaks down the order. I would think that somebody who is very into anality would, be a lot less concerned with the natural order of things. But
yeah, I think that anality is, as he describes it in this book, maybe not as Freud does necessarily, but he's saying that anality is a reminder of your own decay, that you're a god with an anus, or you're a worm and god at the same time, and that anal retentive people try to kind of repress that information and put things in order to keep their own control, to keep their status as a god and not as a worm.
It's kind of like primordial pretentiousness.
Yeah, like the act of defecating forces you to confront that you're made of this, you're a fragile organism, that you are made of, that you are not, this immortal, being of pure existence, that you're, and I think they talk about it later too, where you do have this like dilemma where you feel like you're all powerful, but you're housed in this frail body, and having to confront that is very, very, it's hard to hold both views at the same time. But
yeah,
I feel like
that's an interesting one.
It starts really early. I feel like, that I don't know how a very young child would have gone through both of those to like realize that their body is like decaying. Because I feel like that's how people, are aware of their own death, is that they're not as powerful as they used to be, that they are like on a slow decline. But a child wouldn't experience that. A child only grows and grows in terms of abilities.
I guess not necessarily just that he's going to die, but that he doesn't have full control over his body. So the child thinks that he's a god, that he can cry and get anything he wants, and demands this like mother of his. But then he can't like control his own feces, so he shits himself and like feels really upset about it because like something happened that he didn't have control over, and now it's disgusting and smells, and people are upset about it.
Do you think anality is a sexuality, or are those two distinct things?
I don't know. I feel like with Freud, pretty much everything is. I didn't necessarily get that, but
that's what I didn't quite get from Ernest and Civilization, which is it's just not totally clear to me where the bounds of sexuality is. Like, sexuality is more than just genital contact. I get that, but like, is sexuality the replacement of the pleasure principle with the reality principle? Is it like, I don't know. At what point can you start calling our like pursuit, our intentionality, a form of sexuality?
Yeah, I don't know if I can. In terms of like Ernest and Civilization, I would think of it beyond sexuality. I just call it sensuality more, because I feel like Marcuse's focus is not just like sexual, but like aesthetic, like art, music, drama, like those sorts of pursuits. He's kind of focuses more on that side of Freud, and he's also talking a lot more about civilization and not about like in the individual in the same way, but more like he kind of takes the other half of Freud, what he feels has been left out of the neo-Freudian critique, which is that it's all about how do you make the individual conform, but not the fact that the symptom, as Freud presents it, is it really the individual, or is it the society? It's hard to tell which one is responsible for the symptom.
And that's kind of why I was asking about, like, can you raise a perfect child, which is like, by every framing, we're describing it as this being a generally bad thing. I mean, we're saying, we're using terms like symptom and disease and stuff like that. It's very hard not to look at the effect that society has on us as a bad thing. I think that's...
Yeah, but it's an unavoidable thing, no?
I don't know. I mean, could you maybe lock your child in the basement for 18 years and
they die? I mean, how I think it was Peter the Great who tried to determine, or who wanted to hear the original language spoken before the Tower of Babel.
Uh-huh.
And so he either, I guess you'd call it kidnapped. He kidnapped children, or had children like placed, like removed from caretakers, just amongst themselves. I guess they were somehow fed but probably like just the most minimal socialization and touch, and they pretty much all died.
That's crazy. I didn't know that.
That's fucking terrible. That happened in like modern times too. There was like Lucy the Feral Child or something like that. Who was like locked in a basement and not spoken to, and because nobody talked to her, she like had the mental of a 6-month-old at age 13 or something like that.
Oh, well, is this? I mean, I know there's cases of people who have been so badly abused and neglected that they actually have trouble forming language. I forget if it's like This American Life or it was some NPR show where they mentioned, or it was a story about a boy who he couldn't learn language, or it was like almost impossible because he'd been denied that socialization from such a young age. He was essentially brought up like a dog.
Did he exhibit schizophrenic tendencies, or he was just without language, without socialization?
Yeah, it's almost like pre-schizophrenic, like just the ability to see like abstraction was all like the schizophrenic has the trouble of seeing not being able to differentiate abstraction from real, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't even think he had abstraction. I think he was almost missing that, or it's like, there's some moment in this story where like he kind of got it. He got like a single sort of abstraction. It was like incredibly moving for him. Like he was like led him to tears. It was almost like seeing for the first time.
Was he unhappy? Like, was he anxious? Because I feel like what you're describing is like just the natural state of animals, is they just don't have any of these like abstractions that we create. And at least in this book, they're saying animals don't experience anxiety, which I sort of disagree with.
They don't experience anxiety, but they do experience fear. Like I think animal's life is a constant, being jostled around by various fears.
I think animals do exhibit anxiety, though. Like you think about a dog having separation anxiety, and that is a fear of something that is not present, right? Isn't that like what an anxiety is?
I think he said dread. Dread was the word he said. Animals don't like dread something forthcoming.
And animals do or don't have dread?
He said that animals do not have dread.
And that's, I guess, what I would disagree with, having had very nervous dogs in the past, is that they do. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think I wonder if social animals are different. Because in a certain sense, social animals have to have a certain internal model of others. They have to be able to internally represent other animals within themselves, like emotionally. Like you see monkeys. It's hilarious. Some of the monkeys, like you see like two monkeys who can see each other. One pulls the lever. One gets a cucumber. One gets a grape. And you look at like the monkey who got the cucumber and they're just like, what the hell? There's something, they can't just appreciate that they got a lever and got something because they see someone else who did the same thing and got something way better.
Is the grape better than the cucumber in this example? I'm having trouble.
Oh, way better. Oh, dude, you Google it. It's one of the funniest little 5-second videos you could watch.
Yeah, I would rather have the cucumber, but I mean,
I think you're lying to yourself.
Well,
cucumber versus one grape. He actually talks about this in the book. Like about siblings, about the competitive.
Yes. Yeah, the narcissism.
Yeah, exactly. Like, he got.
Yeah. You guys have siblings, right?
Yeah.
You don't. You don't, right?
Oh, I do.
Okay, you have a sister?
Oh, I definitely do. Oh, dude, I definitely do. Oh, yeah, sibling socialization's a very funny thing in hindsight. Yeah, I've got a younger sister, 3 years.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's like they're both competing for the parents' attention.
It's not even that. Like, that's the funny thing. Like, the parents' attention at a certain point is just like doesn't even matter. It's more like whatever is perceived as good. You want them, like, at least for me and my sister, it was always like whatever like edible treats there were. That's where all the conflict is, or just different treatment. Because I was the first one. Like I couldn't watch R movies before like a certain age, but as soon as I could do something, like my sister was able to too. Like the parents didn't try to like keep the same age, so she essentially got things 3 years earlier than I did, and for a while that really pissed me off.
I guess I was just thinking as like a thought experiment. Like imagine you had two kids that were like super close in age.
It's the closer they are, the more tension.
Right, and that's what I'm saying is they probably have very different personalities because they're competing with each other to extract the most attention from their parents. And if they were the same, then there wouldn't be a good strategy for being able to monopolize your parents' resources at a given time, right? Like you would each have a competing strategy.
Well, yeah, I'm just not even sure it's a specific, like, it's utility. It's I don't think it's a utility function like that. I think it's just literally, if you both acted the same, you wouldn't know you. Like, it's like Freud talks about the narcissism of near difference. Like, the closer you are, the more you have to be different, just for the sake of you being you.
Yeah.
Not even just like to get anything, but just so that you know who you are. I think I brought up I re-listened to David Graeber. He brought up I think it's something in anthropology they call rejection. How, like, you see a lot of different tribes, like the two biggest tribes, I think, in Alaska, like the Inuit and the Algonquin. Like, one of which uses snowshoes, the other uses kayaks. But, like, the one who uses kayaks will not use snowshoes. The one who uses snowshoes will not use kayak.
Yeah, like they have to differentiate.
Yeah. It's like they identify themselves based on what they do not do, not based on, like, a positive thing.
That's kind of matches up with my theory for how we perceive each other, where, like, the first thing we look for when we see somebody new is we look for defects. We don't look for what the person looks like. We look for, like, what they don't look like, and that's what, like, we notice is this person is short, this person is way too tall, or whatever, and that's how we get a sense of the person, which is actually kind of funny, because then the people that we praise the most are the ones that we can perceive the least, right? Like, the best looking people, it's just that they don't have anything visibly wrong with them, and we probably like, for the longest time I could not understand why people found, like, John Hamm attractive, because he just looked like a normal person to me, and I discovered later on that, like, people love him.
John Hamm?
I don't know, just some actor who looks like an actor. I don't know. It's like
John, the Madman.
The Madman.
Don Draper.
Right, but that's kind of how it is for, like, all the Hollywood actors. I feel like, is they just look normal to me. Like, they don't. But I guess people love normal, right? Like, much more than they love distinct.
Not so much
normal comedians.
Attractiveness.
Right.
I don't know. I think that the thinking is that the closer you are to, like, the mean of like brow size and cheek level and like lip size and stuff like that, that's the standard of beauty, because it's closer to, like, the human mean. It's like what humans are supposed to look like. So the most beautiful people are the people that fall, like, in, like, average for, like, lengths and certain parts of their body. But it's abnormal to be, like, perfectly within the human mean. Most, like, normal people have some sort of eccentricity or defect in some way.
Mm-hmm. Which is kind of crazy, because if there was ever any evolutionary pressure, people who are average would probably not do all that well, right? I mean, it's people who are specialized in whatever this weird selective force would be that would survive the most readily.
Sure, yeah.
I just need to find some sort of selective event that, like, chooses for short people, and I'm golden.
Yeah, like I don't know, some, like, limbo game with the devil.
Yeah.
I was looking at there's some like aggregation of like the average features for each ethnicity in the world or something like that, or each nationality. So I had, like, thousands of pictures of American men and women, Chinese, Indian, and all, like, the average people were, like, very normal looking, but, like, very beautiful. Just like the average, like, the mean of all the features of these pictures that they found.
That makes no sense to me from, like, a biological perspective. I mean, what it shows is that, like, that we're not looking for the most adaptive specimen. We're looking for the most conforming specimen, which is actually really sad if you think about it, because the most conforming
what has been adapted to, like, thousands of years of evolution. Like, that's what it worked so far, is what the current average is.
Right. No, I guess that's true. And people who are remarkable in some sort of well-adapted way do much better. So, like, somebody who, looks like John Hamm but can bench press 500 pounds is probably going to do even better. Maybe.
Yes, or can speak well.
Right.
I was thinking, not to steer us away from this, but I was thinking, Michael, on what you were saying about, like, molding your child in, like, a Nietzschean way, the rejection of all cultural values and stuff, and how Nietzsche's value of like reevaluating all cultural values is interpreted in this book as, like, terrifying. Like, the people that are reborn and have rejected all of these characterizations that they've used as defenses against the terror of reality, like, are now just like sobbing and I don't know. It paints a very ugly picture of, like, the Nietzschean value of rebirth.
Well, because if you're reborn, then you've gotten rid of all your adaptive mechanisms, right? Like, you are back to a depersonalized, back to a dependent, back to a unindividuated, feeding machine.
Well, no. See, but Nietzsche's against, like, it's the difference between his Superman and put in contrast with like the Last Man, which is kind of what we are, in our just kind of comfortable lives, like is precisely that heroicism, like that. I don't think the Superman is against or the Ubermensch, the Overman, let's say. I don't think it's against the idea of this book. It's actually rather the idea of this book. How do you take on your own heroic project?
Well, I mean, he sort of denigrates it when Freud did
comfortable.
it. I don't know. I mean, I know I didn't read the Freud part, but it really did make the whole Oedipal project sound pretty dismal. And like, you can sort of reduce somebody's pursuit of becoming a god to a very, if you approach it in Freudian terms, to being a very explainable and superficial pursuit. Like, I didn't really get the sense that in his view, Freud was particularly admirable. I don't know.
Yeah,
I guess you.
Go ahead, Nathan. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, I guess Eddie didn't get to the Freud chapter, where he kind of talks about psychoanalysis as being Freud's attempt at immortality.
Right. And,
where Freud was trying to make his mark, on the history of thought in psychology, with psychoanalysis, and how he, there was a few times in his life where he had these fainting spells, largely due to, Carl Jung, kind of hinting at or kind of implying to him that, he's going to be replaced, or, his successors are going to forget about him.
Yeah. But I don't know. I feel like as somebody who pursues, I feel like that really rung true with me. Like, I would like to be remembered.
Yeah.
I would like to sort of be immortalized for having done something, hopefully better than like, shooting up a church or something. But I don't know. I mean, I guess that was all I was going to say. Is like that. I was surprised at how broadly applicable that was. I felt like that was a pretty rare thing, is that people really did want to live on after their death. But it sounds like it's maybe more common than I thought.
Did they address immortality projects in this section?
A little bit. I mean, they talk about the Oedipal project, which is, trying to become your own father, become a god, and sort of how Freud's Oedipal project was, becoming famous as like this father of psychoanalysis, and this was his, immortality project that he was undertaking.
Yeah, my understanding of, I guess it's in the second half of the book, is of the immortality project, because that's kind of what the denial of death is our lives are constructed around making these immortality projects. Be that you can have it be your own legacy as intellectually, or like as a legend, or even just like having a family, and that's your project is having a family that passes down yourself, so that you're in some way immortal, is our way of rejecting death and solving the problem of death for ourselves, making ourselves immortal in some way that supersedes our own bodies.
Is that not like misguided pursuit though? Like, do you know any of your ancestors? Like, are any of them remembered?
I don't know any of my ancestors past my great grandparents. Like, no, I would say the vast majority of people are not remembered, and everybody's destined to at some point be not remembered. Even
Right.
like the most famous people will. I read an interesting short story by this neuroscientist about it was in a collection of stories about what heaven is. And it's talking about like the heaven is like this waiting room, or this waiting room is kind of like purgatory. And you sit there until you're remembered the last time somebody says your name or something like that. So you have these people like sitting there waiting for tens of thousands of years.
But how do they know that in 10,001 years their name won't be said?
Also, you just like kind of disappear from the room when it's the official last time. It's some kind of like unction.
Okay.
Of course, like removes you from the room. But some people are taken out after 5 or 10 years or something like that. What was the other thing? That some people are like go one after another or something like that, because they were like part of like two people that only remembered each other or something, or only said each other's names. They had no other relatives. I don't know. It was very interesting.
Well, there's this. Oh, sorry.
That was it.
I was gonna say there's this quote that's like there's 3 kinds of you die 3 times. The first time when the life leaves your body, the second time when they lower your body into earth, and the third time at some point in the very distant future when somebody says your name for the very last time.
That's really like fun and poetic to think of, but to answer your question, I do think it's like ersatz in some way. Like I don't know. I won't have any consciousness of my own immortality after I'm dead, so it doesn't really concern me that much.
Right.
Like at an intellectual level, I should say. But I think like most of my actions are motivated by trying to make my life as like big and like impressive, at least to myself, as possible.
But wouldn't then the notion that you will live on after your death in like a Wikipedia article or your grandchildren or something like that, would that work for that goal?
I think it would excite me like personally, but if I'm thinking about it like at an existential level, like that it's meaningless. Like
Yeah.
I won't know enough to care. Like,
Well, do you think
why
that
won't
leads to like anxiety, where if you are like openly pursuing immortality, like Freud would do, then having to confront the reality that your immortality is, really just temporary?
yeah, I think it kind of ruins your project almost to have that perception in mind. Or
Well,
at least,
you guys know the Ozymandias poem?
Uh,
yeah,
yeah. Hear my name. Was it? Oh, mighty.
Look upon my works, ye mighty in despair. In an empty desert, like there's just a rock.
Worked out pretty well for him.
Yeah, but no, there's a limit. But I was gonna say, it is interesting. I'm not sure if you guys have seen Coco.
no, I've heard
I saw half of
It's
it.
you only saw half of it?
I didn't like it.
Oh, fuck off, Mike. Oh, it's such a good movie.
That was like the Mexican man. Day of the Dead one.
Yeah.
I got to rewatch it then.
Oh, it's so good. But it's the ancestor worship. It's not a the afterlife is a real happening place. It's not just some boring waiting room. I think
because they're keeping him around because they would keep worshiping him.
Yeah, well, no, they it's almost like in Chinese culture, you also have this incredible interrelationship between, the dead and the living. Like the dead aren't just like, in a certain sense, you kind of have to appease the dead. Like they're almost more of like a menace. Like that if you don't like keep them happy, they'll like fuck with you. But if you do like bury them in a good spot, it'll bring luck upon your entire family.
Mm-hmm.
But
now, is it? Do they bury?
I just mean Coco. Coco's like the afterlife's a fucking party,
Yeah.
Like, and it's really what's sad is I feel like our heaven, our imaginations in America and like most of the Western culture is it's just kind of like a stale waiting room, But I feel like that's more our imagination's problem than it is the idea that we might exist later, like after death, we might continue in some way.
Aren't all these like religious rites and legacy projects and like honoring people who have died? Isn't that just a way to make us feel better about our death? That's intended. We feel that people will celebrate it even after we're dead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at the least, it is that.
But statistically, aren't most ancestors forgotten? Like, how many can you really remember?
I mean, all will be.
Well, Mike, like this isn't, again, it's kind of our culture that's different. Like my grandmother told me that, it used to be in the South, like the American South, you meet a stranger on the road, you got to start going back until you find some kinship, like it's not okay to just, and I think the same is true in Arabic culture, or Bedouin culture, let's say, like everyone carries, like it's a very fundamental, like the same way that we kind of carry knowledge about like the periodic table or chemistry.
Yeah.
It's a fundamentally important knowledge, your entire like lineal tree, because like that could be your life or death, like you may need to kill someone, like if they're like of the wrong of like
if they're a Hatfield and you're a McCoy. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's the obvious example or the most famous American example, but yeah, like you need most people did know this, because that was an important part of their culture in the sense of that your life is not just some transitory thing.
I bet it was replaced by immigrants, because as a grandchild of immigrants, I have even no personal like familial good feelings towards any of my ancestors. Like I don't even think about them. It literally doesn't weigh on my mind at all. But I can.
Yeah, well, that is kind of our modern American culture is very much a result of that. I just think about how much like the fact that we kind of don't even remember the fact that we killed like millions of people to like live where we are. Is kind of like partly there's so many recent immigrants who didn't have to. And so it's not part of their story. Their American story starts at like Ellis Island,
Yeah.
And that's true for like one half of my tree, which is like my mom's side. But then if you look at my dad's side, it's like, oh no, it goes back to the Revolution and before.
Yeah.
Like, and I can trace it back. Like I don't know them all. Like I haven't memorized it, but like I could pull out the paper,
Right.
Like it's there.
But so what effect?
Record.
What effect does that have on you? Like, do you think that has changed your outlook or like your approach towards immortality or anything like that, or is it a completely immaterial difference?
Yeah, well, and I mean, I have a lot of despair towards our own immortality project, just because I mean, I just see like the cliff, coming up, like we're in this great game of chicken, like, and we're very quickly running towards the cliff, and I don't know if there is a after.
Well, I was really surprised.
You know what I mean?
I was really surprised last time we talked to hear that you felt like things happening today would not be remembered eventually. And I feel like I'm probably saying the same thing I said last time, which is I think we're just getting better and better at remembering. And
well, but Mike, no, see, my thing is it's like Ozymandias. I see that as a reminder that what we think is permanent now, in the long span of history, it most likely is not. And I just, just the same way that I don't acknowledge like cryptocurrency as a currency, because it's too nested in like very complex like systems that are too reliant on like subsystems. Like you can't have cryptocurrency unless you have computers. You can't have computers unless you have, very precise like silicon fabrication. You can't have that unless you have like a society. It's like the tech tree, to use like a say RTS like game example. Like the amount of work you have to do to build up this immense tech tree, that it's very fragile.
But I think we're all in on it. Like I think if we lose that, we're gone. Like we're
but Mike, you've said yourself that you don't see it lasting more than 40 years.
I mean, I don't see American, Chinese, Russian hegemony lasting past that long, but I think, this like,
But you feel the technological structures that are a result of,
I think it has to.
That hegemony.
It's the most
will continue.
Yeah, because I think we're finding the most efficient way forward, and that knowledge is not going anywhere. It's like if we don't want to go back to subsistence farming. We want to use automation to make our lives easier, and it might not be under this like liberal democracy, but I don't think that what we've learned in terms of science and technology is going to go back. Well, I think it's just going to be produced under slave labor.
Eddie, were you gonna?
Well, I'm wondering. Are you operating under the assumption that like human society, will make it past the next 500 years?
I mean, I think humans will be alive indefinitely. I don't see us going anywhere.
When you say indefinitely, eternity, not just like
infinitely.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we'll eventually find a way off this planet in some sort of self-sustaining manner, and then we'll just be living in space as we like try to find new planets. Eventually.
If we did, I can see that happening. I think that's a big if with all the problems we're facing and how far we are from actually like colonizing like stuff past our solar system.
It's probably going to be the families of the ultra rich. Like 99% of us are probably going to die, but I think some humans will survive. But
you're just such a champion of like just societal collapse. Like if society does collapse, then do you think we'll rebuild and get there again, or is there possibly a barrier that stops us from ever moving past our own planet and making like a solar system or galactic-sized society?
I just don't. I mean, when I say society collapsing, I don't mean the ability to form society going away. I just mean society as we know it today. But I think if humans have been around for hundreds of thousands of years in many forms of living and interacting, I think in a lot of ways it's always been the same, where there's just always been this crazy power imbalance, and I think that'll continue because people.
There's never been a way until the last 70 years for us to just destroy all of it all at once. I think it's still very possible.
Yeah. I think we can destroy 99.99% of people at once. I don't think we can destroy 100% of people at once.
But Mike, I guess my main point is like I can see humans surviving the coming, problems, ecosystemic problems. The problem is I don't see our knowledge, I don't see our writing, I don't see computers making that transition. So like if we're relying on that sort of, like if we're relying on the knowledge and the systems that are essentially inside computers, I don't see that surviving. Like that's because I feel like we're underestimating and we're taking for granted the societal systems that actually maintain and perpetuate computers and that entire industry. Like I don't think you have computers without like an incredibly large amount of like public funding and like you don't without public schools, without like a university system.
You need
without a sorry, say that.
Oh, I think you need like global cooperation of many people.
Yeah, and you need to be able to bring new people in. It can't just like people. You need to essentially bring people in and sustain them. You need systems that then allocate resources to them. To do computer things. Like it just.
I would just have a very hard time accepting that there would be this world in the future in which people know that there's a more efficient way, and in which people know that there is knowledge that they could retrieve if only they could power these machines, if only they could build machines this way, mining resources that are there, forming some sort of, and I don't think it's going to be cooperative. I think it's going to be under the threat of death. But what we have discovered is how to do it. Like, so why would we not? It is the most efficient way. We know how to do it. All you need to have are warm bodies. You just need to have people mining, people machining, people shipping and stuff like that. And you don't need cooperation. Cooperation is a nice to have.
Mike, here's the thing. I think you underestimate the amount of precision that's required. You're underestimating the actual societal costs and the actual effort that really goes into making things happen. Like, in a certain sense, like think about the electricity. Just there's an army of people working every day, like trimming trees, repairing lines, like ensuring that things actually keep going the way they go on.
Right.
Like even like if you look at our body as kind of a metaphor, like so much of our energy is just maintenance. It's just literally keeping the pattern the way it is. But like even then, like that can only be kept for so long before you need to like, essentially recreate your organization in an entirely new being.
But don't you think it can be done by force, under threat of death or penalty of?
Well, it can, but then again, I just wonder at that point. Well, like, are we going to essentially erect I could see, okay, let's say like a fascist sort of religion where like we subjugate and enslave people into like the subservience of like the machines.
Yeah.
But then it's like the machines for what sake? Like right now, the reason why we use computers is because like we can do things with them. They facilitate a certain sort of communication between other people. They're not like, we don't use computers because it's like a universal good that we use computers. Mm-hmm. Like it's only because it serves, a certain way of social organization, but then it kind of becomes like a compounding issue where, in a certain way, we're kind of suffering the how do you call it? The benefit, or we got all the goods. So now we can watch we can read all the books. We can watch all the television,
right. I feel like what you're describing
all
is
the content, but then there's the downside to that, which is like, how can you learn and do new things and better yourself outside of that if you just need to spend all your time learning these old media forms, studying and going over all of history's like writings and movies and music and
I don't know. I mean, as a thought experiment, imagine replacing all of the voluntary labor that goes on today with involuntary labor, and imagine that there is like a class at the top which dictates production. It's a command economy of the bare minimum required for coordination of large scale production. So if you want to harvest tons and tons of crops, you're going to need drones, computers, farm equipment, stuff like that. You don't need 12 different file types. You don't need 90% of the media and technology that we have today, but there is a certain amount that you would require. And I think we would probably scale down to that. And that would be the most efficient way of sustaining this large slave population, which we would need in order to keep them alive. Like we would need to be doing things efficiently. I don't know. I'm just speculating and talking out of my ass, but I think that we would require some amount of technology that we possess, probably including computers, to be able to produce enough to sustain a large force of involuntary laborers.
Well, like there's a real interesting talk by David Graeber. I'll link it. But, he kind of talks about how, how like we used to dream of flying cars, but now we just have like the internet.
We have real dolls.
How like, what's up?
We have real dolls.
What is that?
the sex dolls.
Oh, there's like the Lars and the Real Girl or whatever.
Yeah, but better and sexier.
My girlfriend lives under the bed. Why do I need a flying car?
Should we try to bring it back to the book? I feel like we just fell into the trap of talking about this dystopian future in the next 40 years.
I think this is where I dropped off last time, to be honest.
This is every time.
Yeah. Well, because, the books are always just kind of a dropping off, or it's a jumping off point, Like, we're not just trying to, memorize the books, The point is how do the books themselves matter to us, right? In terms of our own immortality projects, what do we, how are we dealing with the problems, that the book addresses, right?
Yeah.
But I definitely see a lot of the kind of like techno slavery. I definitely see that. I just wonder how much of that is already the case. People on computers doing computer things that need not be done at all.
No, I'm not a slave because I build e-commerce websites. I'm free because I can buy things from e-commerce websites with the money I get.
Yeah.
What do you think Freud would have?
You're free. You have all the choices to buy what's on the market.
I could buy from several different websites, so I am free. What do you think?
Yeah.
What was that, dude?
Are we gonna read the Unabomber or like?
Oh hell yeah!
I have it. I have read it.
At least the first part of it.
Technological slavery.
Honestly, this covers what the Unabomber does, but better. Like, in terms of like the socialization, leaving, being hateful to a narcissist, or the pains of What's up?
I just think that we live in a sexist society today where we have male bombers but not female bombers.
That's a good point, Michael.
Yeah, well, feminists would say that what is it? It's like male patterns of male aggression or whatever.
Oh, I was trying to make a joke about male bombing, MAIL, but I guess I fell flat.
Oh, I don't even know that. What's that?
Because he was a male bomber.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you think Freud would have?
Oh, I see. Yeah.
What do you think Freud would have made about people having a rebirth under the influence of LSD or hallucinogenics?
That's kind of like distraction, right? In terms of like, or from what I've read in other places, or people's other thoughts, that to me seems sort of what I would guess Freud would talk about is kind of the way that especially like chronic use of something like psychedelics is very much like just wanting to cloud yourself with like novelty. It's a way of avoiding death by just always kind of being excited by like just trivial stuff. I'm not sure, maybe that's not Freudian, but I personally like Alan Watts's the point, when you pick up a rock, and knock on the door, like when the door opens, you don't keep knocking. You drop the rock and walk through the door.
Who knocks on a door with a rock?
This is kind of like a Zen, not koan, it's like the idea is, the tool that you use to knock, or to make a loud sound so that someone opens the door for you. Mm-hmm. Just the point is, once the door's open, like walk through to the other side, don't keep knocking, essentially.
I guess I've never totally understood the experience of people who live in a state of perpetual enlightenment. To me, it's always felt like a very temporary thing. Like you live with it for a bit. Yeah, right. It must be when it's through drugs, but it feels very much like an upside down triangle where it's just inherently unstable, and it'll eventually come back to a resting state.
Yeah, I think that is exactly it. It's constant effort to maintain the state. It's not a.
But so then, is there a state of enlightenment in which it is not a constant expenditure of energy to maintain?
I don't think so.
Well,
I was listening to Michael Pollan talk about enlightenment through psychedelics and enlightenment as traditionally understood through like Buddhist thought, and how it's really just like moving, creating new neural pathways and kind of moving the different parts of the brain that generally you don't experience in conscious reality. And psychedelics are just kind of a shortcut to the same way that Buddhists achieve it through meditation. But I think either way, like you're either getting it temporarily through psychedelic or through deep concentration through like yogic breathing exercise or like intense meditation. I don't think you ever like stay in that state necessarily.
Okay.
Yeah, from there's a Buddhist monk in Japan. His idea was it's almost like constant suffering. It's not like one way to facilitate that sort of enlightenment or peacefulness is to like exert, like to struggle in like certain like ascetic practices. I'll have to see if I can find. There was a New Yorker article about him. It was kind of about suicide and like depressed people and how so often they're just like caught in their own this like weird sort of dark narcissism.
Uh-huh.
But if you but like one thing, like when I was at a Buddhist temple in Korea for like a week, like one thing about it that was really kind of frustrating for me, it was just you're constantly on this like schedule, and it's like and it doesn't really leave you enough time for like a full, like comfortable night's sleep. But then you go from like, so you get like maybe 6 hours, maybe less, I forget. But then you get up real early. You like run up the mountain to get to like morning prayer. You kind of finish that. Then you go and do like qigong. Then you go and do like stretching. And it was just like there's like a regimentation that kind of fills up all your time. And it always kind of keeps you like on edge, like you're never fully like relaxed. But I think that there's the point that they're trying to do is through that it kind of forces you to find like somewhere in there to like relax yourself, or god damn, I don't know how to describe it. I ran away. I was like, okay, I've had enough. But
how did you end up there? That's interesting. Did you like sign up and then go to Korea, or you just kind of stumbled into the program?
Oh, so I was traveling in Korea anyways, and they've got a temple stay program. I forget the exact temple. I think Bulguksa, maybe. Or no, maybe that's it.
That's really cool. That's interesting.
Oh yeah, but yeah, there's only 2 of the temples that allow individual visitors. But
like a Groupon or something for the temples.
Yeah, well, some of them they essentially demand you come as a group.
Okay.
Just tell them you're traveling with all your ancestors.
I gotta be honest, I definitely recommend it. Doing like an actual like spending time in a minute. They kind of have like essentially they know that you're not fully there.
Yeah.
But, so they kind of have a way of like dealing with you.
Yeah, I always thought that India was the place to go for that, but I guess I didn't realize they had that. And I guess it makes sense. Korea or Japan or China, they have that kind of stuff.
Yeah, India. I wouldn't trust India. I don't know. India's a little far out for me. Just in terms, they're just like, oh man, you just read about all these kind of Indian holy men. They all just kind of seem like grifters to me.
Sure.
I mean, if you buy Alan Watts' sort of thing, the point is they're grifting you until you realize that like they don't like you have everything already. Like that's the point. Is that they're grifting you for your own good.
Thank you. It sounds like
sounds like a
no, go ahead.
No.
Getting back to the text, there were a couple of things I wanted to bring up. I guess I brought up Rebirth because there were a couple of interesting things on it where, to you, at least to me, Rebirth kind of makes me feel like you're having a second experience as a child, only this time you have certain things with you already. Like when you are reborn, you still have language, right? And you still have all of the baggage and opinions that come with language, right? Like, within your language what?
Wait, are we talking samsara? We're talking like reincarnation?
I'm talking
Ernest Becker, right?
Yeah, I'm talking about rebirth in the context of what does it mean to be born again for man? It means for the first time to be subjected to the terrifying paradox of the human condition, since one must be born not as a god, but as a man, or a godworm, or a god who shits.
It's less that you're born with more things. It's that you're born with all the same things you always had, but you have those, like, we talked about those 4 layers that we use to disguise our fear of death. And once you're reborn, those are all stripped away, and you just have your wormness, or your anality.
Right, but you have more than that, though, right? Like, when you are reborn, you're still reborn as, maybe without the opinions of an adult, but with the tools. But I guess my point is that the tools that you have carry opinions with them, right? Like, if you're reborn with the English language, you're still going to have certain opinions about how the world works. Like, let's say you're Spanish, and I don't fully understand how this manifests psychologically, but they have like a gendered language where everything has a gender, right? So if you are reborn in the Spanish language, you're still going to have this view of everything as having a male or a female gender. You can't escape, the constraints, I guess, that language carries, and that part is what shapes our experience as humans, I guess. It's like, maybe sort of like a linguistic determinism kind of thing where what does being reborn even give you if you're still going to be using the same tools that you had been using before?
I have a couple questions. I know you just gave that as an example, but I'm just curious, like, is that something that's been studied? Do people that speak Spanish really like see shirts as female and remember any Spanish, but like shoes as male? Or isn't the word gender originally applied to like the forms of words, and then because word forms for like male and female things like breasts or dresses and stuff like that, so typically align themselves with certain genders, like the first or second gender in a language. That's where our term for gender, meaning like human sex, came from. I think gender originally means just related to language.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't think people associate a shirt with being feminine.
But I
or whatever.
But I understand. And I guess like whenever I read this kind of stuff about rebirth or like Nietzschean rebirth, that kind of stuff, like what form, like practically, does that actually look like? Is it you having a psychotic break? Is that what rebirth is? Or I need to like be able to picture of what a human's rebirth means.
Exactly. Exactly. I can't distinguish between what a rebirth would look like versus just like a change in perspective would look like.
Yeah, it seems like an epiphany would be the closest thing.
Yeah.
I can't imagine having an epiphany. It seems like a psychotic break to just see myself as like an object in the world, or an object in the world, and to have lost all of my character and
like a complete ego death.
Yeah, exactly. That seems like a psychotic incident.
Well, Eddie, think about when you like in terms of character. Think about like the idea of being a character in like a play or a drama. You know, like I've heard Nietzsche's Death of God. It's not really right to say that like God died, or it's definitely not an atheistic thing to say that like how could a God that never was have died? It's the losing of the meaning. It's the losing of the drama that everyone was related to everyone else like through God. God was what like we were all a part of. And it's like, so it's like to think of us as like what kind of character, we're a character in what kind of story, right? Like, I think that's the way that I can see, or that I kind of conceive of it in terms of like when the story that we tell ourselves, about what we are in the world, like what the world around us is, like when we see the story we're in as being fundamentally different, right? Isn't that closer to being like what they're talking about?
You had me for a second. I kind of understood what you're saying. I liked your analogy of like a character in a play, and it's almost like ego death is like what happens to a character in a play once the play is over. Like, who am I now?
Yeah, or it's like a character removed from a play, like Hamlet, who's like thrown into Merchant of Venice. Like, what is he now? Right? Like, I mean, I just think about that Shakespeare.
You figure it out.
All of us are characters with our entrances and exits.
But I think that ego death is so temporary at that point, because you immediately have to figure it out. Like, let's say you take drugs and you have this crazy revelation that nothing is anything, and all these boundaries we draw between atoms are completely subjective, and then somebody is bagging your groceries and they say paper or plastic, and you come back to Earth and you have to rematerialize and make decisions, and all of a sudden you've been not just reborn, but you've been foisted back into being an adult immediately. And the whole idea of a rebirth, of this like return to a childlike state of wonder, is so temporary that it's almost not even worth calling it anything. That it's really a temporary gap in between adulthood. That you've just taken a short break from being an adult.
Well, here's what I'd say is the idea that you're saying you're taking a break from being an adult. I'd say that's not rebirth at all. I'd say you just reconstructed, or you're just like, I think the idea is I'm an adult, but now I'm not. Now I don't know what I am. I used to be able to.
Right, but how long can you sustain that for? And then what is your eventual
you can't,
new state?
Well, the whole thing is it's like you have to rebuild. You have to, if not, but the thing is you won't end up the same place you were. Like when you lose faith in that immortality, when you lose faith in that like narrative, like you're not there anymore. You kind of can't return there. Like it's kind of like the hero's journey. I mean, I guess technically, like maybe you come back, but you don't really come back. Like when you return, things are different. Everything's changed. The way I'd see rebirth, and kind of how I've maybe seen it in my own life, is where I'm like, I know where I am. I know like what things mean, but then, I start to fundamentally question, well, like, am I free? Like, am I, like, what does it mean to be an American? Like, what does it mean? Like there's more fundamental issues of like, what, I mean, I think you can see this maybe more clearly with like, like our political like dichotomy now between like left and right. We're more and more like becoming completely different realities. It's not just, we're both American, but we vote or like believe in different things on like some common platform.
So you're saying you
But now-
adopted a totally new paradigm, a totally new
Yeah.
way of defining A and B.
Yes. Yeah. Like the symbolic constellation is entirely different.
But I don't think that's rebirth. I mean, I guess I just don't know what rebirth is. I mean, to me, again, that's like having an epiphany and looking at things differently. But
Well,
that doesn't
I guess
seem to me like you haven't stopped thinking about A and B. You haven't gone back to a point where A and B don't exist. A and B still exist because you're confronted with A and B, and because in the back of your mind, you know that there's an A and there's a B. You haven't returned to this undifferentiated state where there's not even A or B. You know what I'm saying?
Well, no, maybe it's not A or B. It's rather because not A or B is still A and B, but it's more like the first line of A is now one thing, and then like the second two lines join with the first line of B, and like that's its own thing. And like the three kind of is another separate thing.
But I don't think your paradigm is all that different, though. I mean, I think you still look at things in terms of polar opposites, and I mean, there's still the same themes. It's almost like a child being born with the memory of being an adult, and then immediately growing back into an adult, a different adult, but remembering what it is to be an adult. Like I don't think that ever the memory never disappears.
I guess.
Yeah,
Well, I'm just trying to reconcile what you're saying, Nathan, with what like you're seeing like kind of like more of a Nietzschean rebirth, whereas this Ernest Becker's talking about stripping down your character and just living. Like I can't think of anybody I know that just like lives in horror constantly, like the reality of the human condition, being a god with an anus or whatever. Like I think that's stuff that I'm trying to understand. How does that happen? What does that look like? Like is that something you intellectualize, and then how do you move on from there once you stripped that down? Like is that into what you're saying, Nathan?
Well, I got to be honest, I'm a little off Becker because I don't entirely remember how he talked about it. I'm just more kind of thinking about, I guess what, like in Lacan, what they call like confronting the real, or like they talk about the Lacanian real, which is essentially what hey, by the way, I'm getting some feedback of me from someone else.
I don't hear it. So it might be me.
I think maybe you might come.
Is it still happening?
Here, let me try. It's better now. But, so the idea of the Lacanian real, shit, no, I'm still getting it. Sorry, it's just way too annoying for me.
Let me go on mute. Okay, try it now.
Okay, yeah, so the idea, nope, still getting it.
Wait,
Eddie?
try it now.
So the idea is, essentially our mind hides reality from us because like reality as it really is not something we can handle. Like we can't really exist in reality. Like ourselves is to some degree an illusion, like sustained, like in a certain denial of reality. And so, but sometimes we do, like, I think it is like a psychotic break where you do lose that separation, you do lose that psychic distance between, yourself and the real. And like, I think primarily this is the case with like trauma, I mean, I can't really speak of it, but I mean, I've heard that essentially like in terms of like rape or sexual abuse, especially with like a trusted person, things that you just like repression is not even enough. Like your faculties of repression cannot even deal with it, and so you end up like with these fundamental distrust of your own reality, your own like self-conception, because so much of your own self-conception is in relation to others, especially when others betray you or harm you in certain ways that just fundamentally go against, especially like say like a parent to their child, and like from the child's point of view, there's just kind of no way to deal with it in shit, I don't even know how to put it.
Well, there's a lot more defense mechanisms than just repression. I mean, I think you can, I don't know if it's sublimation where you turn it into something else. But I hear what you're saying. Where I'm not going to try to repeat back what you just said because I didn't quite get it.
It's nebulous for me too.
It is kind of interesting.
I'm sorry, Michael. You brought up sublimation, and so I used to read this guy called Peter Jack, would talk about like four defense mechanisms, and he reminded me a lot of this book. Talking about like these layers of characterization that we had that defend us from this idea that we're objects, not gods. And he would talk about repression, and then sublimation, but then also like distraction, which is like it's like watching TV and stuff, and then anchoring, which is like fixing our values onto like a god or like a sports team or our families and stuff like that. I'm wondering if like where you're getting sublimation from, because I'm interested in like who else talks about.
I took an abnormal psychology course, and they talk about different defense mechanisms, and I just pulled it up. So here's a few of them. You have, I didn't want to go to Pinterest. You have repression, denial, projection, displacement, regression, sublimation, reaction formation. Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's. I would recommend looking into just the modern study of abnormal psychology, because I don't know why. I don't know that they're very scientific, but they are still being taught today.
That's interesting. And those are just ways of like rejecting like painful ideas in general.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a way of dealing with stress. It's kind of interesting how it ties into personality. Like I was going to bring this up as well, where like if you don't have any defense mechanisms, then you don't have any defense against just the despair. I mean, they sort of talk about it in this book where you don't have any defense against the external world, right? And so if you totally eliminate your neuroses, you are left with a full brunt of just pure despair. But all of us, our personalities are defense mechanisms that we've constructed to deal with the pain of existence. And if you, in my personal opinion, if you look at personality disorders like OCD or antisocial personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder or bipolar or borderline or all these different disorders, but then you take out the disorder aspect of it, it just describes personalities. Like some people are just kind of obsessive compulsive, and other people are histrionic, where just everything has to be like a big fucking deal, and they're very like theater kids. That's just their personality. It's not taken so far as to be a disorder, but it is what creates our personality, is sort of these disorders in moderation.
Whether it has a negative impact on your life or not,
right? Exactly.
I think the personality disorder, and now it's been determined that it's fine because it doesn't actually like affect. It's not like a negative thing.
Right. Yeah, and I don't know how.
I don't know how. Your job on time.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we all borrow from some of them. Like I forget if I was talking to you guys about how. Oh, here's a good. I don't think I've told you. Is I kind of have this. Sometimes I'm a very superstitious thinker. Like I'm very much not religious, but at the same time, I mean, I'm a little bit superstitious. Where like, all right, so about 4 years ago, when I first started noticing that I was losing my hair, I don't even know how I worked it out. But I came to the conclusion that I would hold off on it. I would hold off on shaving my head for as long as possible. But the deal that I struck with myself is that I had to do it before I had a kid. And 3 days before Amy gave birth, I shaved my head.
Did you?
Yeah. I'm not like it didn't go totally down to the skin, but I do have a shaved head right now. Yeah. So I mean, I did it. I struck a completely irrational bargain, and I followed through on it because my fear was if I didn't, we'd have this unhealthy baby. And again,
oh really?
I don't even think it's that uncommon a way of thinking, but it is.
I don't think either. It sounds really unlikely.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah, but
I have all sorts of shit like that.
Right, and it's sort of like medical student syndrome, where you read about all these diseases and you think you have them. If you take a abnormal psych class, you're gonna think you're you read about all these things and you're like, oh shit, all of your neuroses are given to you on a silver platter. It's I don't know.
Yeah, a lot of the feelings that I've had, I don't know, it felt hyperbolic a lot at some points. Like I don't know if I've felt terror in all of these ways, but I guess it's saying it's kind of I don't feel the full brunt of that terror because of character defenses. But yeah, definitely like all the stuff he's talking about. Some of the other stuff I always think it's never resonated me with the edible stuff. If it's not resonated, then I didn't have it.
Well, maybe if your mother was more attractive. Just kidding. There was this one thing in the Freud section that I thought was really interesting, where they talk about yielding and about the fear that great men have of yielding and sort of giving in, and it ties into this sort of immortality project where people want to push through this almost like tide that just wants you to conform and follow, and you're pursuing. I don't really understand what causa sui is. They talk about it a couple times, but I don't know. He talks about yielding a bunch, and how Freud just didn't want to yield, and I can see that too. Where it's like and at the time that this was written, it was very funny because homosexuality was seen as a character deficit. Where they're like, I think there's a quote. Let me find it. It's so good. I wrote how triggered I was in the margin. Here we go. Today we generally see homosexuality as a broad problem of ineptness, vague identity, passivity, helplessness. All in all, an inability to take a powerful stance towards life. And I thought that was really funny, but and then today, I mean, I don't know. What do you like? What do you make of like sexually submissive men? Like, do you feel like that has anything to do with this like desire to yield and sort of this almost like nirvana principle where you just want to let somebody else take care of things, or do you feel like life is a struggle against that, or does that just not resonate at all?
That's interesting. I don't know if I know I like close friends like dream habits enough to say like this is how they are as a person and this is how they are in the bedroom. I just don't know if I know enough sexually submissive men to like take a survey.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'll
I
have
do find it hilarious when you see like the orgasm control or I do think I'm sure there's an aspect of like the trust fall in that, in the sense of like I'm sure it feels great when they don't go too far. You know what I mean? Like
it's just
because then it's like that full trust, that full like wow, like I gave up all my defenses and this other didn't harm me.
yeah. I just think it's so silly and arbitrary that like the idea of yielding versus not yielding is completely immaterial because ultimately we're kept alive by things far beyond our control. I mean, we could die and we would have really no say in the matter if one of many, many, many things happened. And like the idea that we have any real material impact over whether we live or die or suffer is just kind of silly given like how global and complex a society we live in. It's we put so much emphasis on this idea that we are in control of our own destiny, but in reality, what we have control over is like 1%. I mean, you look at a lot of the great men in history, and honestly, it's my opinion that they're just great because they were in the right place at the right time and they seized the opportunity. And probably any one of us could have done the same. I mean, it's so much more about the circumstance than about the strength of character. But in our mind, the circumstances don't even factor in. It's you could be master of your domain in like rural Thailand making like $1 a day and feel like a king, and then you could be in America, a blue collar laborer, living a vastly more enriching and materially wealthy life, and feel like you've been completely shafted.
That kind of reminds me of I know you like him, Nathan. Is Nassim Taleb talks about
oh yeah
the heroes of like an accident. Let's say there's like a fire. Heroes are like the firefighters, whereas when you have buildings that have like strong fire prevention and the fires never happen, nobody dies and nobody gets hurt, those people are never considered heroes. And he talks about if the day before 9/11 happens, somebody instated some like strict regulations that some things in the planes or something, or like increased safety precautions on planes, everybody would hate him for having like instated those things and made getting to the airplane to get on the airplane longer. But he would have almost certainly prevented 9/11. Nobody would know his name or remember him. I guess I'm thinking that as far as like circumstantial heroism, which you were just talking about, Michael, maybe that's a little off of what you were saying, but
yeah, I mean, just that it's so much steeped in your perspective as opposed to any sort of reality.
Well, Nassim Taleb, one of
that just didn't have the access to be a Roman emperor, like noble men, like in terms of spirit, but just didn't have that kind of opportunity.
Well, do you think it's better to be a big fish in a small pond?
Yes,
I do. Yeah,
it's always better to be at the top of a small hierarchy than at the middle of a huge one.
It's better to be the big fish in the big pond than the big fish in the small pond. But better to be the big fish in the small pond than regular sized fish in the big pond.
That's so funny to me. I mean, it just seems like logically we should know that it's better to be a medium fish in a big pond, but
no, but it's not though, because we're social animals, and you gain a lot more health benefits from being on the top of even just a little tribe.
Is it health benefits, or is it just that we feel good?
Yeah.
Like we have this neurochemical activity, and that is what causes the health benefits. But then doesn't that beg the question that if we could just live life in this, artificial state of thinking that we're the shit, even though in reality we're not, as long as we thought we were, we would be better off? Because I don't agree with that.
Well, no, see, the problem is so like that's kind of the difference of being like a child than being an adult, like
I'm going on
trying to say something. I guess it's just his
Sorry, what were you saying?
No, well, the thing is, so like we kind of know, like in our world where you kind of go to the internet and you get to be like whatever you want on the internet, you know what I mean? Like we kind of live in these little narcissistic bubbles, where like everyone kind of agrees with us and you know, in like we all kind of realize there's a certain feeling of like permanent adolescence to it, you know, or certain like I want to call it like, you know, like the corporate pastel, you know, sort of like got to steal something from Felix Biederman, you know, it's like Grubhub or like you're a goody good boy, you know, you deserve a treaty treat. Like the kind of like you know, our corporate messaging is kind of infantilizing to us, you know. So in a certain sense, we live in this perfect like Oedipal situation where like if we want something, like we can just call it up and like it'll come to us, you know. But we also kind of realize that, you know, that's not what we really want. Like that our options are incredibly limited in that. Like to be able to live that way where you have the kind of material whatever, you also have to be alienated to be that way. What I was going to say about being like social hierarchies, like Sapolsky, I think in his book, I think it was Behave, you know, he talks about one, like there's a certain kind of continuum of like the stress response. Some people don't get as stressed, but certain people get like really stressed. But like one thing that's always great to relieve stress is to like beat on someone below you. You know, you can kind of like, by abusing those like lower than you on the hierarchy, like you can relieve your own stress.
Yeah. And it's funny because all this stuff is pre-capitalism. I mean, I feel like today they'd have you believe that this is just capitalism, that, you know, we're all, you know, socialism never took root in America because we view ourselves as temporarily embarrassed millionaires, that, you know, oh, sorry, what?
Oh, no. I mean, we did view ourselves as I mean, there's a history to that too, you know, like in a certain sense, and that may return, you know, once the boom is over. You know, something I've realized recently is that we're all kind of boomers. You know, it's still the kind of late front of the post-war boom.
Where we still
like,
the American
we're still
dream.
just like spring chickens, you know, in a larger span of history. You know, we're still living in like the American, like imperial, like economic hegemony, where we get to print the world reserve currency, but also have to be the consumer of last resort. You know, like, how long that will last, or like, I don't know, how long we can be appeased is hard to say, you know, but like people will organize again.
Yeah, I guess my point is that like a lot of the complaints that people levy against capitalism, exploitation, and that we're deceiving ourselves, and that, like you're saying, you know, we really get off on, you know, not that we have any certain objective amount, but just that we have more than other people, or that other people are suffering rather than us, or sort of like how they talk about in the book, how people go off to war, not, you know, because they think they think the person next to them is going to die, not them. You know, and that stuff is just fundamental to human nature. That's not really tied to any sort of economic system.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, this entirety of COVID, you know, like it wasn't until everyone was kind of allowed back out and they forced everyone to wear masks that I even wore a mask.
Yeah.
Like I didn't wear a mask the entirety of lockdown, even though I was working and shopping and doing whatever the whole time. I just kind of put on my little like invincibility. Yep, I'm invincible. Nothing's gonna harm me. You know, like just living in pure delusion. Like that's how I got through the whole thing.
Well, and it's kind of funny because that's what the Neo-Freudians are doing, is attacking capitalism as saying it's like the source of, you know, all this extra surplus repression. And honestly, it just seems like what
You're
everybody.
talking about Marcuse?
Yeah, Marcuse, and, you know, probably everybody after Marcuse too is quite anti-capitalist. It seems all the Marxist Freudians.
Mike, what if we distinguish between productive capital and like finance capital?
Yeah,
like
but I guess what I'm saying is,
realizing and trying to talk with you is that like we're not making the proper distinctions of capitalism itself. Like right now, our problem is we don't really, and even productive capitalism is not in terms of like Marx. You know, Marx says, "Oh, value is created through production," but that's not really true. Like most value is maintenance. It's literally just keeping things going. Like you get like a plate, or you get a washer, you get any of these machines, these great machines produced by capital. Like they only get produced once, but you know they need to be fixed constantly. You know, one of the biggest problems of our current capitalism is that everything's made to be destroyed. It's made to be thrown away. Like we don't make things that last. We don't make things that can be repaired even. Like they're made out of cheap plastic, and as soon as they break, you just throw them away. You know,
yeah.
Like in a certain sense, there's an economic function there, but it's also incredibly irrational. Or the fact that, you know, it's people, or like car makers, or even those producers of commodities, or the great industrialists. It's better for them economically, like within our current economic structure, to throw away surplus production than it is to give it to people. We could easily make enough for everyone, but there's a certain aspect of capitalist production, or at least our current method or current way of going about it, where we'd rather throw it away than give it for free.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my point is just that a lot of the accusations that people levy at capitalism in terms of the repression that it causes the individual are repressions that really would have always been there just by the fact that we're so brutish to each other. And
oh yeah. No doubt. But the thing is, capitalism is still saying, but here's the thing, just because it's natural doesn't mean we can't do better, right? I mean, capitalism itself sold itself as being better than aristocracy. But why are we allowing aristocracy to return just because we don't want to do capitalism better, right? Why are we letting things return or using capitalist production to reinforce an even stronger aristocracy than we had before, when we know we can do better? We know it doesn't have to be this way. That's what I find so frustrating, and even talking about this, why is our capitalism now being reduced to the point where it's no better, where it doesn't even care about production, it only cares about extracting rent?
Right.
Why does Boeing not worry about making a good jet, but rather about how to play finance games to up their share price? All the industrial manufacturers, all the car manufacturers, all the appliance manufacturers, they don't even care about making products anymore.
Well,
they care about making money.
I'll tell you why. It's because
by printing money.
It's because production of value under not just capitalism, but while using capital, is predicated on the expectation of return. You only lend money because you think that you're hoping that the person will make money with it and be able to pay you back. And so what we're seeing is people playing this game where they're trying to assuage the feelings of stockholders to drive up stock prices. And that's just inherent to how money works, I think, is America is kept afloat because there is confidence that America will keep growing, that our economy will keep improving. Without that, you see runs on everything. It's capitalism falls apart when there is no hope. And so these games that people are playing are just part and parcel of the practice of lending money, of borrowing and lending.
But here's the thing, Mike. Money has not been the same thing over the past 100 years. In the early part of the 20th century, literally money was based on, say, the gold standard, which essentially only goes so far, because when you're limited to money being pegged to gold, you're inherently caught in a deflation, because you always need new money. The economy cannot just exist with a set amount of money, or at least it can exist in capitalism with just set money, So we threw out the gold standard because it essentially was, putting arbitrary restriction on capital and our ability to do capitalism, right? So then we had fiat currency, and we had certain things around full employment. I don't know the specifics of it, but so what is it? From World War II or the end of World War II to about 1980, we had an entirely different economic regime. I guess we did have the gold standard, but then there was some other thing, but it kind of wasn't. I forget. And then Nixon took us off in, what was that, 73, or fully took us off. But yeah, I mean, either way, it's just our current, the Fed system, and especially this Fed socialism for corporations, it's just ridiculous to me. I mean, we were joking about this earlier in the year with the money printer go burr, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, why can we print money? Or even in 2008, why is there infinite money that we can print to resolve the bets that people have made, in large finance operations? But somehow we can't forgive student debt. Somehow we can't forgive medical debt. All our money has we've been cutting public spending, and we've just been making up for it with private debt. And it's just how much longer can this really go on?
Well, until the national debt gets so high that our interest on it becomes unpayable. I don't know. I don't understand economics.
No, but the thing with the national debt, it can go forever. You can't actually balance the national debt, or you can't. If you resolve the national debt, we have no money. The money in circulation is the national debt. The national debt is not a problem because the national debt is not like personal debt.
Well, we have to make interest payments on it, right?
Yeah. So what? That's more money in circulation. I mean, sure, we have to avoid the situation of like where the state just becomes a method of extraction for those who own national debt, where essentially we have like in England, like the English state, like you think about the Jane Austen novels, where you have all these like people collecting different like what do you call? They got like an allowance. Everyone's got their like allowance that they're fighting for. Like all of that's kind of like national debt, and so then you have the state like squeeze production out of like the peasants so that they can like service debt, which is given to the upper class. But even then, it's not removed from circulation. It's just another reinforcing social relations.
Yeah.
You're gonna break in? Yeah.
No, I've reached the limits of my knowledge of crony capitalism and economics.
Yeah, but I mean, you can see the difference between like what's going on now and what was going on at like the beginning of the post-war boom, or even
I don't know, just that
our
what produces wealth for us has shifted away from production of physical goods, manufacturing, to management of wealth.
But I guess the thing that frustrates me is that it's just the only growth that we can get is through cannibalism. It's just literally extraction. Like there are issues in the term in like infinite production, where the only value comes from production. Like that's not it. Like that's not the ideal state, because you need to constantly produce to have shit. It's so annoying listening to myself.
Oh, sorry, I'm gonna go back on mute. I think we should probably wrap up for the for the night. Do you want to do part 2 for next time?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, so part 2 and 3, denial of death. Ernest Becker. Who wants to start?
I feel like you probably have the strongest grasp of what happened. I gotta tell you, definitely during the discussion of like Freud, I mean, obviously the whole thing is a discussion of Freud, but like specifically about the criticism of Freud's theories, my comprehension definitely went down a lot. I started listening to a book on tape, which I had more trouble paying attention to. But Nathan, if you want to like just briefly summarize this.
Well, you're talking about at the very end of part 1, right?
Oh, that's right. I hadn't finished part 1 last night, where I was.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's fine. But yeah, I mean, I can easily summarize it. It's not about Freud's theory. It's about Freud, the person, as being emblematic or like how he himself kind of fits into the picture that Ernst Becker is painting via rank.
Like Freud's
and so essentially, psychoanalysis as Freud's immortality project, as his religion, essentially.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting talking about when Freud like fainted, talking about like swamp bodies and like something about Egyptians. Like it was just like so overwhelming to him that he passed out. And also that like Freud and Rank were both like kind of terrified to visit Rome because of like the blood that had been spilled in that soil.
Oh no, that was Freud and Jung.
Oh, okay.
Freud did visit Rome eventually, but Jung never did, apparently.
I visited. I didn't. I don't know. I was like 14, so I guess it didn't mean that much.
But Becker like specifically said like this seems like super weird to anybody who's just like, why don't you just go to Rome as a tourist? Like it's not a big, like normal people can handle it. I still didn't entirely understand why it was such a big deal. Yeah.
All I can think of is similar to how Freud kind of used Rome as like a metaphor for the mind itself.
Yeah, like in civilization, it's discontents.
Yeah, I mean, so essentially civilization, like Rome is the civilization that he's talking about, I think. Or I mean, essentially, like it's almost like he has this idea of Rome. It's like having to confront the idea.
Yeah.
Or the reality when you have such a strong idea and feelings about this idea of Rome.
But does that mean that he's afraid of like being wrong? He's afraid of going to Rome and finding that it's actually not this like, I don't know, archaeological pyramid of, things being built on top of older things, and it would kind of invalidate an already kind of shaky theory?
Not so much that, but like in the specifics of how it is one thing built. Because that's his whole idea, is that it's one thing built on another.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true, but I think it's also like maybe what's also still there, or I don't know, just in the sense that, because he essentially says Freud's a neurotic.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Becker sort of oscillated back and forth between taking a very psychoanalytic narrative and then one that's sort of like above psychoanalysis, where, talking about Freud's fainting as if it means something, implies that you're buying into psychoanalysis, that you can decipher that it's not just high blood pressure, that it's not, just a heat stroke or something, that it actually means something. But then, I think he also takes this, like, psychoanalysis has he takes a very, like, anthropological look at it at other times where he doesn't really buy into it. But I don't know. It was sort of like he's going for the best of both worlds. Did that make sense? Did you guys feel that at all? Or where do you think that Ernest Becker is a psychoanalyst? Hello?
Like, what do you want? I'd say he uses psychoanalysis, or, like, let's say ranks psychoanalysis to then look at psychoanalysis. Like, he doesn't exempt psychoanalysis from from view.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's also important, like why should Freud be exempt from analysis? But I think the thing with the fainting was, like, that was a big deal to Freud. Like, and apparently, like, he kind of talks about it as being, like, everyone wrote about it. It was like a thing that Freud fainted, and it was like, why did he faint?
Yeah.
And it's partly due to the how do you call it? Like, the motivation of psychoanalysis to render things clearly, or to bring things to clarity that are kind of outside, that maybe you would just, like, oh yes, he just fainted. Oh, like, it just happened. And it's like, no, like, things don't just happen.
Well, it's kind of,
it's like, it happened for a reason. What could the reason be?
I mean, it's kind of funny because I feel like if Becker wrote this book today, it would not be very well received. Like, I can only speak from my experience, but, like, I went to college in 2006, and I went to a school that had a very strong Freudian history. Like, Freud lectured there, and there's a huge psychology department, but teaching Freud was, like, very much looked down on. Psychoanalysis, like, it was impressed on us very strongly that psychoanalysis is, like, no longer valid psychology today. But then, I feel like I was reading, about, like, Lacan, or, like, any of the, like, Deleuze and Guattari, or, like, any of these other, like, more modern philosophers that are very much, like, into psychoanalysis. And, like, in France and outside of the U.S., it is still very much in vogue, but really just not in the U.S.
I feel like his analysis of specific mental disorders has to be pretty dated, right? Like, I don't know, the stuff about asbestism is, like, really, just like a primitive, like,
What you don't think homosexuality is a psychological disorder from, like, an inability to I don't know, self-actualize? Yeah.
No, Mike, didn't you get it? Homosexuality is a immortality project to make a young boy to raise up your successor, or to make someone into your.
That's not just homosexuality, but that's also pedophilia. Yeah. I don't know. What if someone today just took a very strong psychoanalytic stance, and people were like, well, being transgender is, normal because people used to think homosexuality was a mental disorder. And what if you replied with, well, homosexuality is a mental disorder? I don't think that would go over very well. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that all depends on, what is this order that it's dis from,
I have always been kind of, like, struck by, and I don't mean this to sound bad, but, like, homosexual couples that look like each other. Like, have you ever seen couples like that? Like, it's not every homosexual couple, but, like, there are some where, like, they look really similar. And it's like,
like a twin thing?
Yeah, I always kind of wonder if on a psychological level, like, you are trying to, I don't know.
Love yourself?
Basically, like, in a way that you can't internally. You're trying to do it through another person. Or what that says.
It's like the causa sui, you want to suck your own dick.
I mean,
you want to make yourself the complete golden circle.
The Ouroboros of, like, fellatio.
Yeah.
Well, I've seen heterosexual couples that weirdly look like each other, and that always creeps me out. And I think it could just be, like, a confirmation bias. They don't notice couples look like each other, but I think, like, sometimes when you spend all your time with someone, you just kind of, like, slowly mesh into dressing the same and looking the same.
Well, at the very least, like, it's hard to be a couple if you aren't of a similar culture, right? So you're going to have some, like, certain, like, fashion norms that equate with each other, right? Like, I feel like it would be very hard for a couple in America, where it's like your identity, where you wear your identity through your clothes and, like, fashion choices.
I don't know, you don't think it's, like, a little incestuous? Like, if you date somebody who looks very similar to yourself, like even a heterosexual partner, isn't that kind of like if you had a sister or something? Like, they would look kind of similar to you. Like, maybe that could be the underlying cause.
See, this is what I'm wondering about, what Eddie means by similar. Like, they literally are both wearing, like, a shirt and blue jeans, or, like, they're both in, like, the same, like, so you see, like, two hipsters, or like there's kind of like a range of fashion choices within that category that they both fit into the category, or, like, they literally are wearing, like, couple t-shirts or, like, couple pants. Like I have heard of that, with like both wearing the exact same shirt or like, and that is weird.
No, I think it's mostly just a coincidence that some like definitely like you might dress similarly because like you're assimilating that person's like clothing style and also their maybe their like idiosyncratic gestures and facial gestures or whatever they're called. But I think it's mostly just like me noticing like these people are looking the same, and then like Michael is saying like, gee, that's kind of creepy to be looking. Like it is kind of like I don't know if it actually comes from a drive with them.
Well, here's what I was wondering. Like again, I was wondering what you meant by similar. Like how similar? Like is it just on the outside in the sense that they look like they're from the same culture, or is it like you said, like you were elaborating a little later, like their mannerisms are similar, their preferences are similar, like they literally almost converge towards being the same person?
Can you guys see what I just posted in the chat?
Yeah, I'm gonna open it up. Is this a couple bit similar?
Our marriage in Red Rock Canyon.
Like I don't know. I mean, I don't want to be like racially insensitive, but like you know what I'm talking about?
I think they look pretty similar. I just don't know if there's any actual drive behind that, or if like how many couples are there? How many, like what percentage of them do look similar and what don't? And what percentage of couples would you expect to look like?
Well, if you encountered a clone of yourself, what would you do?
Okay.
No.
I'd kill him. I mean, you either have to fuck him or kill him.
For sure, Mike. There can be only one.
Fuck, marry, kill.
No, skip the first two. There's this what is it?
Well, what do they say?
This town's only big enough this town isn't big enough for the both of us.
Yeah, but they also say, what is it? Give me 6 soldiers made out of lead and I can conquer the world, something like that. I mean, if there's 6 of you, imagine what you can accomplish. How much you can suck each other's dicks.
Oh, dude, we could make each other so fucking miserable. Oh my God. Like, I'm already like cynical and like depressive enough. I really don't need another one of me. Okay.
That's good to know. I mean, I feel like that is like, it really does say something very deep about one's character, like whether they would like to be surrounded by somebody who is the exact same as themselves.
Yeah, no, I definitely value those different from me.
I like this thing that Eddie just posted because the top comment on it is hilarious.
There's just another couple that kind of looks like each other.
You think they look like each other? I don't know.
I think they have like the same like just dour weird expression.
Yeah.
You guys spend too much time on Reddit.
Yeah, well, that's definitely true.
Michael has me on this marriage subject.
Yeah, see, I totally agree with you that like I'm sure like similar vibes, like because you kind of with any two people that you spend enough time with, you do kind of converge, like you kind of resonate. Because if you don't, or you need to have some sort of harmony, otherwise it's just too stressful.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know that. I guess I didn't. It's just too hard to say like they look the same.
Yeah, I mean, it could be nothing. I don't know. Maybe some of psychoanalysis is like, what you see in others is you're just projecting. And if you're like, really pushing some narrative a little too much, maybe it's really internal. I don't know. I don't know. I guess. Oh, what were you going to say?
Oh, well, I was going to say, Mike, did you, or did either of you listen to any of, I think, was it Sheldon Solomon?
No.
He's essentially taken Rank's work and translated it into like what is considered psychology now.
Uh-huh.
Like essentially through doing like empirical testing. I guess he's developed the idea, or it's now called terror management theory.
Oh, I have heard of that.
Yeah. So yeah, he's it's really interesting. I mean, essentially like there's just so many different, very interesting like results they've done. They've done a lot of like subliminally reminding people of death. But sometimes they'll like interview someone by a mortuary. Sometimes they'll just have them do something on a computer and like do subliminally flash like death. I think literally just the word death.
Yeah.
And like certain very interesting like results you get when you remind people of death in terms of like they're far more, they heavily prefer those that they identify as being like themselves, be that either nationally, spiritually, like what religion they associate themselves as, what nation they associate themselves as.
And also their attitude towards death, predilection for confronting it?
No, so this has nothing to do with how they actually confront death. I guess the only people he's found that are like resistant to death are like, I guess they've done testing with like Buddhist monks. And I guess they're pretty heavily resistant. And then also those who have a very high like self-esteem or like self-opinion, those who are like confident in themselves, are not as easily swayed by like death. He's not like overtly reminding people of death again. It's entirely like subliminal or like aside the point.
Yeah.
Like he's not interviewing them on death. He just he's doing something else, but in a place where it reminds them of death.
I was thinking about this last night as I was falling asleep. Like, what do you make of people who really like either watching like gory things or horror or basically like consuming media that like is very centered on mortality? Like, why do people seek out like this simulation of death?
What I've read is, and I just posted some like repression techniques that this guy Zapp used to talk about.
Yeah.
That's kind of a form of sublimation. It's encountering this like horrible fear you have and acting like you've dealt with it, even though you haven't. You don't like seeing gore like in a fictional setting or in a setting that's not actually hurting you or affecting you is much different than actually seeing it in real life or being the victim of gore. So it makes you feel like you've dealt with it, even though you really haven't.
I wonder if that's like therapeutic too, where it's like you can subject somebody to like sequentially more and more, horrific media as a way of like desensitizing them to make them worry about it less. It's kind of funny. My little brother used to be deathly afraid of snakes, and I'm sure there's some sort of psychoanalytic explanation there.
Yeah, Peterson has plenty to say on that.
Oh, really? But what he did was he went to desensitization therapy, and they like got him sequentially closer and closer to snakes. Like he wouldn't even go on hikes. Like he wouldn't go near the woods or anything. And now he's like, completely like he's an adrenaline junkie. He like does all these things that are incredibly dangerous, and he just has what seems like no more fear of death.
Well, that's what Becker was almost talking about. I mean, he said it's you're referring to necrophilia. He said that like these people are afraid of dead bodies, and then they overcome their fear, and then they want to have sex with dead bodies. Which again, I don't know.
I mean, that sounds like a pretty reasonable explanation for why one would want to have sex with dead bodies. I can't think of a better one.
Well, here's the thing. I guess the main thing is that, like, I feel like what Becker points out is, like the different responses. Then you have the one who's like, they're scared of death, but then they're just rushing into new experiences all the time, right? Like that was another.
So like an existentialist, somebody who's trying to stave off the fear of death by experiencing as many new things as possible.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, through So again, or maybe like by pursuing risks, like I don't know. That's a hard one to say. I'm not sure if it's kind of like you bring like the golden mean into this is like it's somewhere in the middle of like you want to take risk but not, or you want to be courageous but not a risk taker or not a foolhardy.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I honestly can't judge it. I just know that I'm definitely described by the neurotic.
I was just gonna bring up the neurotic because it's like that is what they're saying. What happens when your immortality project is it when your immortality project fails, or is it just when you can no longer
lose your character armor? Your character armor no longer like shield you from death.
Yeah, it's like a fail. I think he calls it a failure of heroism, and heroism is like this embracing of a false kind of constructed reality to put aside or like get through your fear of death.
Right.
So one of the things they said in the beginning is that the neurotic has fewer defense mechanisms, which I'm not really sure if I buy that. I think that like I feel like what I learned in psychology was that in college was like somebody who's depressed has no defense mechanism. Like if you work through all of these defense mechanisms, you don't sublimate, you don't have reaction formation, you don't have projection, you don't do any of these things, then and I think it was Marcuse also said this, but like you're confronted with just like despair. Like you have no defense against stress. And so you can't deal with it and you just become depressed. And I'm not sure that that's the same as being neurotic. Like I feel like people that are neurotic have like a pretty active defense mechanism. Maybe it's like, I'm kind of feeling like through the process of throwing off this like false reality of rejecting this heroism, like you're pushing back against the reality principle, perhaps because you have a strong id, like what Freud was saying, like that like we replace the pleasure principle with the reality principle by the means of like the super ego being grafted onto the ego and pushing back against the id. But if you just have a very strong id, then you're not going to accept this like false reality, and you're going to end up being neurotic, which is almost like a strength to me. It's like I see it in more of a positive light.
Well, I mean, it's the same that he says, like, so where I can look at this positively is the sense that you're looking at reality itself, or looking at reality itself rather than like just going through your like and accepting your social reality is like neurotic. That, you know, if you were just comfortably enmeshed in your society and the social norms and the stories and that kind of prepackaged immortality project, like then you're not neurotic.
So would you say
Like,
that? Oh, sorry.
No, well, I was going to say, remember last time you guys brought up rebirth? When I was re-listening to the book, the only place I remember finding him talking about rebirth was the neurotics rebirth into the social order. And so you give up your like neurotic, like individual sort of craziness or whatever you're kind of dealing with to just be born back into normal everyday shit reality, you know, that everyone else is kind of a part of.
Yeah.
That's what he was saying with the limits of psychotherapy, was that, you know, you get the psychotherapy to like deal with like your own misery, and then it's just like, hey, welcome, this is like just the misery of the real world now you get to live in.
Yeah. It's just the norm. You get to you give up your individual misery for everybody else's misery.
Well, so then historically, have all the great artists been neurotic, or can you be a creative person and still, you know, heroic?
Well, it seemed to be what he was saying, was that if you are a neurotic, what you really need to do is become an artist.
If you have
I
talent.
forget which section of the book. No, not even, just that literally you can't, you need to make it real. You know, you can't just stay in your head. You know, you have to externalize, because part of it is that you need to make yourself a part of the world.
Yeah, to earn immortality.
Yeah. So like you won't really, you know, that essentially there's no real immortality, but at least trying, you know, to like express your own self or whatever your neurosis is, trying to make it a real thing, a real object in the world, is one means of at least kind of maintaining that selfhood.
I think it's pretty spot on. Sorry, what were you saying?
Oh, no. You can jump off from there.
Because, like, I mean, I think probably I'm also pretty neurotic and somewhat creative, but, like, I feel like the way that my creative cycle goes is, like, you know, I don't know where we start, but, like, I make something that I'm really proud of, and I feel like, almost like like my goal is to, like, I think I've said this before, is like be immortalized, where it's like you want to create something that outlives you and, you know, becomes part of the human, you know, just part of the culture. And then, you know, you've created something, and then, you know, you rest on your laurels for a little bit, like it makes you feel good, and then after a while you're like, oh, this no longer gives me any like self-confidence, and then you feel anxious because you know you haven't done anything to like justify your self-worth, and then, you know, you sort of go lower and lower and lower until just it becomes too much to bear, and then you start on a new project because you can't do anything else, and it just repeats, and it's like this creative neurotic cycle. But it really resonates with me that like it is an attempt to like earn immortality. Like, you know, I think what every creative person wants is to become famous. Maybe not, but maybe.
Well, I think the main thing is, like, one thing he points out in terms of like the limitations of the causa sui, or like causing yourself, or let's call it like, it's kind of like Aristotelian godhood, you know, like where you're fully like self-contained, make your own self. I thought your own will. I
thought causa sui was basically an immortality project. Are those not really synonymous?
No, well, it's immortality. It's essentially, the way I understand it, I mean, causa sui is cause oneself, which, kind of going back to Aristotle, is kind of how he described
like
godhood.
Like a first cause?
Yeah. It's like you are the first cause of your own self. You're like, it's like being fully contained in yourself. Like, you don't need or require anything outside yourself. But I think fundamentally, he spends a lot of the book kind of talking about how we kind of want this, but that fundamentally that's like a dead end, that you really don't in the end, because you kind of you want to be validated by others.
Yeah.
You know, but the causa sui doesn't accept others. It's like, as soon as you accept others into it, then it's like causes all this trouble.
And you're like beholden to them.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I guess the main thing is, yeah, you do need to somehow earn the recognition of others. You need others to see you as you see yourself.
So it's sort of like a social phenomenon outside of heroism. Like the neurotic pursuit of creation is, you know, you're still part of this, like, you know, artificial, you know, societal values, but you're not totally immersed in it to the point where you you've internalized it. You still think you're outside of it. You're not a hero, but you still need it. Like neither the hero nor the neurotic has like become this like Nietzschean Übermensch where you're just, you exist outside of the trials and tribulations of society.
I guess I want to challenge the Übermensch thing again. Isn't the Übermensch the one who makes new rituals, new games, new myths for society?
I mean, I view it as like the person that has managed to fuse the master and slave morality and sort of exists beyond it.
Well, but the thing is, it's like, but you're not alone though, right? I mean, in a certain sense, it's not I guess it's hard for me to see this like Overman as being an individual.
Yeah.
Because again, it's like who is to recognize you? I mean, maybe you don't need the recognition of others, but isn't part of being a human wanting
maybe
to pursue the same thing as others?
I don't know. Maybe not though, because like earlier on in part 2, he talks about leaders. Like the hypnotist or like Charles Manson or somebody like that. And
Transference?
Yeah. Right before transference, I think. But like basically, the leader seems to exist outside of the pressures of society. Like people latch on to the leader because the leader can represent to them immortality. And it really made me wonder what goes on in the mind of a leader, like what makes one, above this sort of inherent slavishness. And what it sort of points to in my mind is somebody who is an island, somebody who has risen above the pressure of society. I don't know that it's similar to, an Übermensch, but...
Isn't, actually, Mike, I want to fight you for pushback on this. Isn't it exactly the opposite? That literally the position of the leader is the most socially pressured position?
Mm-hmm.
Because literally, you no longer get to be a human the way the others do, because
Right.
They're using you for their own ends. You're only a leader to them to the degree that you facilitate their own desire.
I mean, yes, he does say that, but I also feel like a leader by definition has to be the opposite of what a slave or, a slavish average person is in order to be, like what makes somebody able to be like a hypnotist? If you go and get hypnotized, sure, it's because it's bringing out some inner fear of death and you're transferring onto the hypnotist and all that. But like, what about the person who's doing the hypnosis? What's different about them? And it feels like it has to be the opposite of the follower, right? Like it's a dichotomy.
Sorta. I mean, I guess I don't like. I mean, it's important that you have a confident tone. It's important that you appear outwardly confident, but that doesn't mean that on the inside you aren't like eaten away. That like you aren't just incredibly frustrated with your situation.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of a question that I had, is like, even the people that seem like the greatest of leaders, maybe they're living in the perceived shadows of previous ones, like maybe Hitler's like admiration of Julius Caesar, where it's like, even as powerful as you are, you feel like you're not going to live up to the the shadow of a giant that's no longer around.
I more like the idea that Hitler's leaders were like the women who shat on him.
Yeah. Is that confirmed, like something that happened? I never heard that before.
He liked being pooped on?
Like being pooped on?
Yeah.
I never heard that.
I've never heard that.
Oh, really? I thought there was, I forget, I remember kind of hearing something about that, but maybe it was just like it's too easy to be like, oh yeah, of course he had some like sexual kink, some weird shit like that.
But then again, I hear a lot of Germans are into that.
I mean, yeah,
just the scat fat fetish. I mean, I know the Japanese are as well.
I mean, I guess I bring up dichotomy because, and maybe this is just me like looking for a lot of like A or B in things, which I think we are want to do. But like, for example, like Nietzsche has this like master versus slave dichotomy. Like I feel like here there's sort of like a leader follower dichotomy, and it's like I'm kind of wondering why there's not like, why is it a dilemma and not like a trilemma? It's like, why do we always look for like 2 outcomes as opposed to like 3, or like I don't know, why does there have to be a dichotomy? Why aren't we just describing? Yeah, I don't know.
Well, isn't that just the most basic split? Like in terms of differentiating.
Sure, but I wonder if it's like a cognitive bias or like a logical fallacy to like jump to a dichotomy.
Oh yeah, I'd bet for sure. I don't know specifically. Like I don't have a list of like mental heuristics in front of me, but I mean, as far as I'm aware, even when we look at the world, there's a certain horizon across our viewing plane that like, so it's kind of horizontal. If you draw like a horizontal line across the middle of your sight, what's processed below and above the line are different. You have different wiring to like handle the things that you see, like above and below the horizon. Like, I mean, of course, we don't see a line through our thing, but like our mind apparently deals with it differently.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that's kind of just mathematically, that's just the basic, first, like relationally, like going from singular to dual, it's just like it's the most simple sort of,
Well,
1 to 2, you can't
right.
go like you need to, oh shit, there's a whole, like, I wish I could find it. There's something like the Chinese story of the origin of the universe. In terms of like, first there was the 1, and then there was the 2, and then there was the third, and the third gave rise to myriad things.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm not familiar.
It's like the Taoist creation of the world myth.
I guess I kind of visualize it as like it's two sides of the same coin, but you got like a pocket full of coins. I don't know. It's like I feel like
I feel like just think of a coin. Like you've got two faces, but people don't even look at the edge. People take the edge for granted.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure that's what you were getting at, but
I don't know. I mean, I feel like it's not like either you're a leader or a follower. Okay, so what I posted in the chat is like this thing that we learned about back in college, where there's like in chimp dominance in a hierarchy, there's like alpha chimp, and then there's like betas, and then it goes down. Basically, like I think they're all in a sequential hierarchy, and then there's the omega at the very bottom. When the alpha is removed, and then one of the betas gets promoted to alpha, there's this shift in their brain, like chemically, like they start producing a lot of serotonin, and they have like different brain activity, not before, but after they become promoted to the leader. And so it's like the process of becoming a leader transforms you. It's not like anybody is inherently born, in my opinion, as a leader, but you're put in this role and then you start acting. Like, for example, if you have a lot of responsibility, you just don't have time to be anxious, perhaps, and you need to be assertive and make decisions. And that is sort of the hallmark of, being a leader. But when you're not in that role, then, you have, I don't know, less pressure, you have more ability to let your thoughts fly. And it could ultimately just come down to brain chemistry. But I always thought that was really interesting that like when somebody becomes a leader, they create this dynamic like that didn't exist before. Like, let me find the page.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that's true. I mean, whenever someone's put, like, that's one of the things, when you're put into a position of responsibility, like, it allows you to, like, be a different person.
Right, yeah, you can flourish in a way that you couldn't before when you didn't have that responsibility.
Yeah, like, people who may have been, like, troublemakers or rebels, like, put them in, like, somewhere where people are counting on them and, people are trusting in them to get something, to accomplish something, and, they might rise to the occasion.
Right.
I mean, of course,
somewhat.
Oh, it's just he talks about the ruined by success. Some people put in the position or crumble.
Yeah.
And can't fulfill the duty of the position. Can't embrace it, can't change.
Yeah.
And sabotage themselves so they can get out of it.
Yeah, the notes that I have are like the act of establishing yourself as a leader creates a playing field. So like imagine a situation in which there are no leaders. So there is just a very flat structure. When you introduce somebody as the leader, then what it does is it creates this dynamic where you define things that didn't exist before. Like you now have followers, groupthink, outgroups, a new moral reasoning, like the good of the group. And like these things did not exist until a group was established vis-a-vis the creation or promotion of a leader. So it's like just the act of creating a leader creates this whole paradigm that just didn't exist. It's interesting because it is kind of artificial in that way.
Well, but Mike, that just made me think of something David Graeber mentioned, and that was like so in a certain sense, the relation between a leader and followers is already somewhat socially dependent, right? Like it's not an entirely like fresh thing. Like so when someone like is or is nominated to be a leader, say in an American context, like you have different like associations that go along with that. I just remember he was talking about a story about some sort of social organization, I think in Africa, where being the leader meant you're like the first one up in the morning. You're like the role model. You're like, hey, I'm getting ready to work. What about everyone else? Like in a certain sense in America, you're like the chump almost. Like you're like the lowest guy. But it's like in that culture, it was like, no, you're kind of like you're leading you have to work harder than everyone else. You don't just get to like tell other people what to do.
Yeah.
It's almost like you have to like show them what to do, or like you have to be the the role model for everyone else to follow. When you don't have a society built on like domination, where like someone says and others obey.
Yeah.
Like when you don't actually have that power as a leader, or those your followers don't believe you have that power, like you get different. You get a different result out of the interaction between all the people in the group.
Yeah. Okay, wait. I have a word etymology question. On page, and this is like about the group. The way they call it is, here's a quote. "It's not so much that man is a herd animal," said Freud, "but that he is a horde animal led by a chief." What's the difference between herd and horde?
I don't. Was he saying horde as I assume HOA?
No. HORDE, like barbarian horde.
Oh, I was thinking like horde as in like to hoard.
Okay. Yeah, no. A horde. But yeah, I guess I'm gonna look it up. I feel like they're.
Hey, I was gonna say I need a definition. Horde. Yeah, I guess. Well, the main thing is with the herd, it's my understanding of like dynamics is you don't have.
Oh, here it is.
You have like the inside and the outside, so you kind of have like whoever's on the perimeter is kind of like the lowest, and whoever's in the middle is like high, if you wanted to say like status wise. But it's like everyone kind of like anyone can spook anyone else is my understanding.
Yeah.
I don't know in terms of like how they actually like how say like zebras sort out like mating hierarchies or whatever.
So it looks like a horde is predatory and a herd is domestic.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that makes sense. Yeah, like I feel there's all these, I don't know, placing somebody on the outgroup is a very violent thing. Like when you ostracizing somebody could probably even be seen as a form of social violence. I mean, one that's very condoned today by social justice warriors, but ostracism is certainly, if not physically, mentally an attack. It's something that we fear.
Oh yeah, but I mean as much as I'm against that sort of behavior by the SJWs on right and left, or left and right. Yeah, I mean that's definitely a much older phenomenon and doesn't require.
Yeah.
Like it predates the ideology.
Yeah.
Wanting to cut other people out, to define a circle and like gatekeep who's in and who's out of it.
I mean, it's probably where taboo comes from. Like if you violate a taboo, then you face ostracism. I think Freud talked about that in Totem and Taboo, but yeah.
Or I mean, if you're in Hawaii, you face death, where you gotta run to the, what is it, what do they call this? By the way, so I'm getting reverb on one of your guys' mics.
Try it again. Or what? I don't know. Whatever.
I'm trying to. Yeah, but I just remember that when we went to Hawaii, there was a shit. Yeah, I'm getting it, but it's a pu honua aho now now. Was like they had like the safe zone where it's like if you committed a taboo and you ran to the safe zone, it was like you tag, you're safe, and you're good. Yeah.
That's crazy. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, the breaking of taboos, or just that kind of social game of like, yeah, because if you don't, like the gods we're going to be punished for your action.
Michael, you there?
Yeah, I tried.
I wonder if he went on mute because his speaker's messed up. Oh, it's so good. Seems like it's always in the middle that it.
Can you hear me now?
Gotcha.
Yeah, it was like I tried going to push to talk to cut down on the reverb. Are you still hearing it?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, a little bit.
Is it too much? Should I figure this out?
No, it's all good.
Okay.
I don't know. It's just funny, like what changed in the past like few minutes. It's been perfect up till now.
Yeah, I don't know.
Is this where you come to meet women? This is a good spot, right?
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, what's up?
Hey, what's up?
You joined our podcast. You've consented to being recorded by coming into this.
We got our Diogenes on the line.
Well, okay, here's a point that I wanted to make, and Dylan, you can weigh in on this. What do you guys think about ritual sacrifice and the utilitarian value of sacrificing somebody? Let me get the quote here, page 138. The community gets more life by means of the victim's death, and so the victim has the privilege of serving the world in the highest possible way by means of his own sacrificial death. Kind of like sacrificing, in that South Park episode, Miley Cyrus in The Harvest. Basically just like, okay, let me give a better example. So My theory is that people love celebrity deaths, like Jim Morrison or Amy Winehouse or Kurt Cobain. Like it's very cathartic that celebrities die, and it is sort of like almost like this like harvest ritual that like. And again, I think South Park like actually made it about harvest. But do you think that it's justified then if somebody is sacrificed against their will, if everybody has bought into this like belief that it will bring them good things, like the pleasure that it brings everybody, would that outweigh the pain of the person who is sacrificed? Or is that like sort of one of those thought experiments that like makes you reject utilitarianism?
I think usually the utilitarian response when it's like, should we make somebody suffer if it benefits a much larger group of people, is do you want to live in a society where you're under constant fear of being sacrificed because it will benefit other people? And that fear within the people that are still living in the society will ultimately outweigh the benefits they get from sacrificing one person.
Interesting. And it's not as simple as like you don't have the fear because you're in group A and only group B gets sacrificed?
I think that's one response to it. Like, I don't know, the argument against utilitarianism I always hear is like, should you let like a group of 100 pedophiles like abuse a child? Nobody else can find out about it. And usually the response is like, if anybody did know about this, like it would just be this massive tragedy and everyone would be bummed out.
Get moved to a different parish.
I feel like so many of these, like, I love these thought experiments, though, where nobody knows about it. Like, for example, let's pretend there's a guy living in the woods, and none of us know about him, and then he dies. Painlessly, but he dies. Has anything bad happened? Like, his death has not negatively impacted anybody. Is there any sort of, like, moral value to his death?
I don't think so, but even David Benatar and, like, antinatalists think that if somebody living dies, like, there's something lost in that. And I've never entirely understood the argument. But just because there's like a life lost, that's an ethical bad,
so
a negative thing in the world.
Are they anti-abortion?
I guess it depends on who you ask. Like, it's a good question, actually. Not sure.
Yeah, Mike, I just think it's impossible to do the math. It's not like that.
So is it then utilitarianism is just thrown out?
No, well, see, the funny thing is I was thinking about this because, like, in a lot of ways, I act utilitarian, though I hate it as, like, a moral philosophy. Like, I think it's just the most stupid thing to, like, elevate to the highest. But it works in a lot of ways, you know? It's like, it's not bad, but I just don't, there's no reason to put it up as, like, here's the right way. It's just like here's a way that you could do things that might be good. Like, I mean, that's a pretty lukewarm justification of a major system of moral philosophy. Like, is there a better? No, I think it is lukewarm. I think that's as good as it gets. I think utilitarianism is a very lukewarm moral philosophy.
And then virtue ethics or deontology, are those any different?
No, not really. Well, no, actually, deontology is it's like space almost. It's like no human beings can live there. The absolutes of hot and cold. You're either in the sun or you're in the void. Like, deontology is like Kant, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like super extreme, but it's also like not at all possible. I mean, just think, just like, how can you not use people?
I know,
you know?
that's what I was just thinking of.
Ends in themselves.
Like, how does dating work if you have that approach? Can you date?
Not in our normal American way.
Like, there's no such thing as like a one night stand in Kant's view.
I wouldn't say that. I mean, well, there's not in the sense that you go in like, I'm going to use this person and get out. But I don't think but marriage is also probably not.
Wait,
right?
In Kant's view, can you consent to be used as a means? Like, can you consent to being a sexual object? Or is even that unethical?
I think. I honestly don't know. I mean, of course, his breaks down, again, in all the real, like, once you put it into reality, like, how it's not really that useful.
Yeah.
I agree. I've in my adventures in antinatalism, people were trying to say that because, like, you're having a child for your own gratification, that's using a person as a means to an end, so you can't even, like, or like.
I mean, I'm listening to Owen scream his head off, so I think he's here of his own accord. He's having a good time.
What about that?
Well, here's what I want to know. What's up, Dylan?
I was gonna say, what about that? You're talking about consent. What about that guy? I don't know if you remember this story. It was some dude in Germany, like, consented to, like, he put himself on Craigslist and was like, I want
to be eaten.
Yeah.
It was like, yeah, he was like, I want you to eat my penis, and then I want you to kill me and eat me. And like, someone was like, okay, and then like that happened, and I think the guy like got off or something. I don't know. It was like a whole ethical quandary.
Hopefully he got off. Wasn't that the whole point?
Well, because he didn't kill him, right?
No, he did.
Kill him.
Like first they like cut off the dude's dick and then they ate it together and then the guy killed the other guy. But the guy wanted to be killed. I don't know. I'll link it.
Yeah,
Okay,
that
'cause
sounds
I
really
thought
familiar.
They worked it out in such a way that the guy who was going to eat him didn't kill him.
Technically vegan.
Like he got there and he was already dead, and then he ate him as previously agreed.
I mean, isn't that sort of just like a crazy version of like mutual combat laws where you're like consenting to get the crap beaten out of you?
He's known as der Metzgermeister, the master butcher.
Yeah, people like that really freak me out.
He's in prison for life.
He went to jail?
Yeah, he's life in prison.
Wow. Holy shit. That's not how I thought that was going to go. Sorry, what?
Oh, I did want to say, just kind of going back to the name, or maybe it was as far as Eddie. Is it the thing is are the parents using the child, or is the child using the parent? I'm not entirely sure which one it is. You know, like did the child use the parents to get born, or are the parents using the child?
And kind of mutual. I mean, the parents get something out of having a child, and the child needs the parents to survive.
No, I mean in the sense that the child, like,
His own
the
conception.
child caused him in a certain there's like a perspective you could take. Like if you look at what do you call that shit? Not ontology, fuck. What do you call that? Where the end causes the beginning? Fuck.
It sounds like the Finnegan's Wake, you know, that book by James Joyce, where it starts with the second half of a sentence and it ends with the first half of the sentence, so it just forms one big loop. Sorry,
Yeah.
I got very sidetracked in reading about this guy with the severed penis cannibalism fetish.
I bookmarked it.
Yeah, I want to go away from this
Yeah.
eating penises and people.
Yeah. I had...
Sorry.
That's an immortality project I'm not very interested in.
Yeah. Can we talk about castration anxiety?
Like that's the logical feature.
Okay, so Dylan, I don't know if you know, but castration anxiety is this Freudian idea that the child sees the naked mother and believes that her penis has been severed. And that's I feel like I've never really bought into that much. That like the way they describe
It's
it.
not there.
Because what?
He sees there's a person without one.
Yeah. But like I feel like it's a little conjectural where like the way they describe it is like a formative event in the child's life, sort of like the primal scene when they like encounter their parents having sex and are like disgusted by it. Where like I feel like every 50% of the time that doesn't even happen. Like I don't even think I ever saw this is probably TMI, but I don't think I've ever seen my mother's vagina. I don't know about you
I was
guys.
thinking about that too, and I seem like it's probably repressed. We probably
Yeah.
our mind is there's certain things our mind properly forgot.
It must, yeah. If I can't remember, it must be Freud must be right. Which is like the get out of jail free card for psychoanalysis, where you can't really dispute it. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. It's just I don't know. There were a few things in there that they call formative events in like your psychological development that I feel like are not necessarily just by happenstance not guaranteed to even happen.
Definitely not the primal scene. Like your parents can
Yeah, same.
not do that. The other outlandish thing I thought with castration anxiety was when he was talking about how fetishes, like the object of your fetish, like a corset or a shoe or a glove,
Yeah.
those are all just
Yeah.
replacements for the phallus.
Yeah.
Which was like, where are you getting that from?
I love that.
Yeah, I didn't quite understand the replacement for the phallus thing, but in the terms of making a woman not herself, like that is understood. Not how do you call it? Not being able to confront the animality of a woman.
Well,
Like, that makes sense.
He's saying that the shoe fetish is like the most popular fetish because it conceals like the animal nature of the foot. It's a disgusting cow thing, but I don't know if it was the case back then, but I feel like I read something that said foot fetishes, just like plain feet, were the most common fetish. And it had to do something with the location of like the homunculus in our brains and how close
Yeah, I heard that.
the foot is to the genitals. I don't know if there's any merit to that, but he's talking about how like we're trying to conceal the foot where it's actually the most common fetish now.
I don't know. I think feet
that
are
is
gross.
weird.
But I guess if anything, that just shows they're very polarizing.
No, see, I don't know. I don't relate to that fetish. I guess.
Sorry, what?
Sorry, Mike. What?
I was going to say that my personal theory on why we find the foot disgusting is because it looks similar enough to the hand, which is the most useful part of our body, but the foot is like ridiculously useless. Like you can't grip anything with it. It's basically like a bastard version. It's like a bastard version of the hand where it's like, you sort of have this gut reaction. Have you guys ever seen Ron Howard's brother? It looks like Ron Howard, but just a little bit worse. So it's like that. It's like it's when you're expecting one thing and it's like a worse version of it. It's so much worse, and that's what I.
Howard.
Clint Howard, that's right. Yeah, that's what I think. I think that the hand is Ron Howard and the foot is Clint Howard. Anyway, what were you gonna say?
I'm still pointing a picture of Clint Howard.
No, I was just gonna say about the foot.
Jesus.
Yeah, I definitely don't get the well, isn't there something about like inferiority with like foot fetishism in the sense that like you want to be like stepped on by women? I mean, not in the sense of like like women's shoe fetish, but I mean like women like foot fetish. Like for those who are into the naked slut.
Dude,
I don't understand it at all. Like, I feel like it must be like some kind of just chemical thing in your brain or some kind of like trauma from your childhood that you didn't have.
Well, everything's a chemical thing in your brain.
When you're foot worshiping, are you reclining and the foot is above you as if it's walking on you, or are you kneeling over the foot looking down on it? Because I think that's an important distinction.
Oh, well, I thought you're on the ground and she's like seated, right?
I don't know that that's always the case. I've
or she's stepping on your face.
Yeah,
and you're like licking. You know, it's whenever I see like
so the foot dominates you. You don't like dominate the foot.
The woman in the dominant posture and like the guy like kneeling in front.
I don't know. I think we're gonna need a little bit of research because if
yeah, okay, that's homework for next week.
Because if it's not always the case that the foot is dominating you, then I think that theory goes out the window.
Mm. Yeah, well, I think it is again. Well, because the thing with the foot fetish is, or the what he's talking about are the objects that obscure it. But at this point, like we're so much further along the line of like wanting to feel something when like everything's exposed. You know, it's almost like no, like show, like I want to see everything. You know.
Yeah, I mean that's always kind of interesting. Where it's like it's almost the sexiest is when there's still a little bit of clothes. I don't know if other people feel that way, but yeah. It is sort of a phenomenon of like why people love lingerie so much, as opposed to just nude people.
Mm. Yeah, have you guys seen Hitchcock's Vertigo?
Yeah, long time ago though.
Yeah, that would definitely be an interesting rewatch. That was in Zizek's Pervert's Guide to Cinema. That was one of the things that originally kind of made me interested about Lacan, was just that idea of that he just can't handle that like the woman herself. He's not really interested in her at all. What he's more interested in her as like someone who can or like a being who can then become this other thing, this like non-real, this almost this like dead or no longer alive or maybe not ever existed woman.
I need to rewatch this because I'm reading on the Wikipedia. Critics have interpreted Vertigo as a tale of male aggression and visual control, a map of female Oedipal trajectory, a deconstruction of male construction of femininity and masculinity itself, a stripping bare, blah, 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 blah. I don't know. It does seem very psychological. But I was going to say, I mean, even just the active, and this might be like a little too general, but it seems like even the active sexual intercourse is very anti-Kantian, where you are turning the other person into an object. Like, I don't think that when two people have sex that you are experiencing the other person as a person, at least the entire time. There's probably, maybe at some parts, but I mean, I think at least in some substantial part of the process, you are objectifying the other person.
Yeah, that's why he said it's hard for women to find to be recognized in that, because they don't really they really are not needed. Like they can just kind of check out so long as their body's there.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the Freudian view of female sexuality leaves a little bit to be desired. But I don't know. I mean, from like even as we know it today, wouldn't a woman objectify a man in a consensual sexual encounter to some degree?
Part of what he was talking about was, I didn't entirely grasp it. He was talking about how why it's horrible to be objectified is because it reminds you of your animal nature. But then when two people have sex like consensually, it's saying like it's okay to be like an animal for a while. It's something about how it merges. People are this soul or like self and a body, and then you're like merging your body with another person's body and self, and for like a brief period of time it becomes okay to be like all those things kind of blended into one. Do you remember him talking about this? He was trying to say how that form of objectification is okay because it's like somebody accepting you for being an animal.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny because the French, I don't know if it's like a euphemism, but they call it an orgasm le petit mort, the little death, which is kind of what you're saying, where it's just a temporary suspension of your own eros, your own immortality project, where you give in to just this sort of mindlessness, and ideally you both give into it together, and then you bond over that, I guess, because you're both comfortable turning into an object for the other person, because that's what you want to be, is just an object and not a human, because that is the small version of the embrace of death. it's like a very small nirvana.
Dylan, you got any take?
What?
I'm on the topic of like fetishization though. I wonder if pornography has created almost like a very mainstream commonplace fetishization where like people, and I don't know if this is everybody's cup of tea, but I feel like the idea of like a blonde haired large breasted woman is like become a so commonly desired, but it's still a fetish, right? I mean, it's basically creating a mainstream fetish. I don't know. Did anybody else feel that way?
Yeah, well, Mike, it's a fetish to the degree that you're like, you need these like coordinates, these symbolic coordinates, like large breasts, blonde, like those have nothing to do with the woman herself. It's like, again, like when he's talking about fetishism, how like, again, the woman, who's like the fetish object, in a certain sense, she can feel pretty empty in that because like, it's really not her that the guy's into, but like the things she's wearing, it's like, or like, so it's like in a certain sense, it'd be a little weird if it's like, or just think about like the attraction to like Asian women, it's like, or any sort of the kind of like, oh, or like, yeah, I'm into redheads, or things like that. It's like, well, like any redhead, like as a woman, I can imagine, or I would imagine a woman would be like, well, like what makes me different, like what's special about me that you want? Is it just like if I changed my hair, would you be like, go limp, you
right.
know?
I mean, and I don't know if I'm being too cynical, but I sort of feel like that's just how sexual attraction works, where like what you're doing is you're taking these like, I don't know, visual or mental patterns or, that you learn to recognize early in your sexual life and then looking for somebody that meets them. I mean, like you're saying, if you're into redheads, I don't know, maybe any redhead will do. And if they dye their hair, all of a sudden that's sort of a big hit to their sexual reaction. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I feel like a lot of people like rail against that when it's like Asian fetishization, where it's like, white guys who are looking for an Asian woman and the Asian women are like, well, do you really like me or do you just like that I'm Asian? But the skeptic in me is like, I don't know, extrapolate that to not just Asian, but whatever like trait you're looking for. And is that not just a lot of, of sexual partnerships?
Yeah, sexual racism is an interesting one.
I mean, I guess, yeah, because it does have like the effect of being racist, but like in and of itself, it's pretty universal. I almost feel like it's pretty universal, where it could just as well be an Asian person as it could be a redhead. You know what I'm saying?
Michael's penis does not discriminate.
I'm a cultured man of the 21st century.
No, see, Mike has always had a thing for blonde, big.
That's clearly not true.
No.
No, that might be me, Nathan.
I'm striking this one from the recording. I'm going back and I'm editing this section out.
That's like the social one or like the big one now, like culturally, right? Like Hugh Hefner was like, oh, I'm in my like blonde phase or whatever. But like, hasn't it changed like throughout? I mean, the past, like what's desirable?
Michael Hefner blonde.
I'm ready to do a real hard pivot onto a different subject pretty soon. If you guys want to wrap it up.
Like in the 80s, it was like huge titties all over the place, right? And it was like flat asses, and now it's like asses for days. So like it's changed. Like the society has changed, like and preferences.
And what's responsible for that?
Well, obviously the answer to that is international Jewry, Michael. I thought you knew this. I thought we're talking about Freud still, right?
Yeah, we've gone international. That's right. I forgot about that. They send me the emails and I don't read them.
Oh, you gotta read the emails, dude. They're so good.
I get the dividend checks, but I just don't. I don't follow up on the social media campaigns.
Did you don't go to the meetings? You watch Borat, right?
I get my APAC check. Yeah, I watch Borat.
I love how he goes into synagogue and he's just like, "Hello, fellow Jews. Like lovely weather we are controlling."
Yeah. I don't know.
I have something to pivot off.
Yeah. How do you dial it back from sexuality? But go for it.
No, well, I was just the main thing, or just kind of a tangential subject that I was interested in was the idea of the religion of the other, or like looking for, or just he kind of traces all the different ways in which we try to look for mortality and fail. And like one of those being looking for or trying to see God in the relationship or in a romantic partner.
Yeah, I might have missed that part. Was it in one of the Kierkegaard chapters? Because I skipped those.
Side of that is the pickup artist dilemma, which is when you no longer respect any women, it just becomes like, oh, I'm going to conquer as many
So you're saying the opposite of that is looking for some sort of like sanctity in another person. I almost feel like looking for God in another person. Doesn't that objectify the person, and you're basically projecting
Yes.
your internal notion of what some sort of deity is onto the person? Like I guess in this situation
Yeah.
where your choices are, turn them into a god or turn them into a thing to be done, how can you not objectify a person? I mean, I know this isn't like a dilemma; it's probably like a trilemma. But what does it mean to have a relationship with a person that is not objectifying at all? Because I'm not sure that is possible, right? Like, I mean, the whole reason you have sexuality in the first place is because you are looking for I don't know, reassurance of like your own wavering place in the universe, and that is sort of like the root of sexuality, is that you're placing that need onto another person. You there?
Yeah. I mean, it's just interesting on like placing yourself in other, or like projecting yourself into others. I mean, it was like I remember Krishnamurti talking about like perception, how perception, there's something outside you, but it's in that thing together. It's a between, because like whenever it's you, whenever you're involved, whenever you're perceiving, you're kind of projecting. It's like all perception is projection.
Right. I mean, it's kind of interesting because in terms of the like psychosexual development, you start off with this probably oral phase, and then an anal phase, and then a phallic phase, and then you go into a latent phase between like I feel like between when you're like 7 and 12, or 7, maybe 7 and 11 or something, where you just don't have any sort of anality or orality or phallicity or whatever, and then you go into a sexual phase. I think they call it the latent phase, is what I was just saying. But basically, you don't enter a sexual phase until you are in puberty or close to it, which makes me sort of feel like what you're learning how to be sexual. You're learning what sexuality is, and that process looks like transferring your immortality project onto another person, and then you can either have that person be a member of the same sex or opposite sex or whatever. But basically, before that point, you don't even have a sexual object preference. Like, you're not homosexual or heterosexual until you've entered into the sexuality phase.
What would you say to the families that say like they knew their child was gay since he was like 5?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that would sort of contradict that.
I was gonna say, Mike, I don't quite agree with. I definitely.
Do you think that you make a sexual object decision, be it homosexual or heterosexual, before you have gone into a explicitly sexual phase, like even when you're a child?
I don't know. I'm thinking of a kid that goes to our school who. I'm trying to think of the right way to phrase this. Seems like he will most likely grow up with some sort of atypical sexuality or gender identity. It just seems like evident from what.
Are you saying you think he's going to be gay, or you think he's going to be other than gay?
Hard to say. So he could be like non-binary or something like that. He wears a dress to school, and like has a very different way of carrying himself than other kids do. And I don't know. It could just be like the way he's decided to act, but it really seems like intrinsic to his character.
Yeah.
And I would be surprised if he just like, if it was still completely undecided and there was like the same chances that anybody else of choosing a sexual preference at the same probability as just anybody else.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say that Freud's theories are totally valid today, but I think Freud would definitely say that children are neither homosexual nor heterosexual until they've entered into a sexual phase.
Well, that just got me thinking.
That makes sense. I mean,
well, see, I was wondering,
heterosexual or homosexual until you're sexual in general, right? I'm saying there's some kind of there's something that's built up, and it's not just something that develops like when you start going through puberty, right?
Well, okay, so if it's predetermined, if it's not this like Freudian prescription, the way that he's laid it out, where let's say the way that he views it is like you make I feel like it's transference, where you make a sexual object choice of like what gender you will view as a sexual object. And obviously this does not really hold up with bisexuality, but if we were to assume that it doesn't work the way Freud describes, and that you are either heterosexual or homosexual or whatever your sexual identity is, if that's decided at a very, very young age, is it decided before even a younger age where it's just inherent and you are either born gay or not? Because I feel like that's what a lot of people say. But if that is the case, if you are born that way, then there must be a biological mechanism, right?
I think it's likely a combination genetic and environmental.
But what are you basing that on?
I guess no, but they don't. There's no gay gene that they're aware of, right? And can't you? Aren't you more likely to be identify as gay if you have a sibling that's gay, regardless of if they share your genes or not?
I don't know. I haven't heard that, but possibly. But I feel like if there is no gay gene, like if there is no strictly deterministic mechanism, then it must be your environment. I mean,
but it could be both. There could be genetic factors that lead to being gay and environmental factors.
Yeah.
And that's why it's less you think of it as being you're just straight, rather than like you have this weird like concocted sexuality that's different from everybody else's, like every single person does, and that kind of society encourages you to just put it into a certain box, and you're either one thing or the other, or a third thing, or something like that. Where really just like you're this own like unique sexuality, and
but then I feel like you're getting back pretty close to what Freud is saying, which is that you template, be it through maybe you have this biological predilection that is pushed over the edge by environmental factors. But what you do is you end up making a sexual object preference one way or the other, and I feel like that is not what the zeitgeist is saying, which is today people feel like there is no choice. There is no like if you're gay, it's because you were born. I don't know. Maybe I'm just out of touch with what people say. But I feel like what I hear is people say you're born gay, and that's it.
Yeah,
and
I think that's an expedient way to frame it, which for like political reasons, which is maybe not accurate, but could be. I don't know. I just think it's easier to say like when you start talking about choice, which I think the choice would be out of your control. It's like a choice.
Oh yeah.
It's something that it's like a subconscious thing, or I feel like you're a determinist. You're just thinking it's going to happen regardless. But if you say it's a choice, then people are going to be like, okay, well, just choose not to be then, and we want to do it.
I'm posting the most offensive comic I've found, but I feel like it's highly relevant. I showed Amy this the other day. Stone Toss.
I challenge you, Mike.
Why did you choose?
I want to see if you.
I feel like
shock me.
Out of context, this is not that interesting. Probably just means to be said.
Oh, I just got it.
But sorry, this is a total tangent
I don't
because
get this at all, Mike.
Yeah.
It's really dark.
Yeah. Sorry, that's a bit of a tangent, but I've been like not obsessed, but I've been like super interested in how good this comic is at just being offensive. Not that I like it, but I feel like it's done really well. But that's a topic for another time.
It says a lot with very little.
Mike, can you explain this to me?
Is that like a
My stupid brain.
It's
The Shadow. It's about like rape, Nathan.
I was like, it looks kind of pedophilic.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because
You got it. You got it. But anyway,
is this like the cartoon equivalent of that joke you told about like the problem is like beautiful kids or whatever?
Oh God, what's the leading cause of pedophilia? Is sexy kids.
Sexy kids. I mean, is that essentially what this is?
You're recording
saying?
this, right, Mike?
Yeah, this is for the internet.
I'm sending it to my mom. Yeah, I'm sending it to Amy. I'm
Yeah.
sending it to my mom right after we're done. Thankfully, with everything I'm interested in, people zone out about the 30-second mark. So I think we're good.
Oh yeah, Mike.
We're good here.
Mike, if anyone made it through to this point, like they deserve to cancel us.
What's your guys' review of the book overall?
I thought it was phenomenal. I found it really hard to get through because every paragraph was very interesting, and so it just took me a really long time to get through.
I thought it was really, really dense. Like I had kind of like brilliant insights, like several times a page.
Right.
And then there's other stuff. Honestly, like there's stuff that I just don't care about as much, but I'm sure was really interesting, which is mostly like him like arguing with his contemporaries, but also like the psychotherapist that he came from, which was like kind of cool. But I feel like I would have been more interested if I was like more invested in the field of psychotherapy, or was a psychoanalyst. Sorry.
I thought it was very relevant because we just read Marcuse, and I feel like Marcuse had a much more optimistic point of view than Becker did, where like in Marcuse's point of view, if we had this sort of Marxist utopia, we would eliminate a lot of the surplus repression that we face as a society. But in Becker's point of view, I feel like he's a little bit more realistic, where like Marxism and utopian thinking isn't going to change the essential human condition, and we are just sort of doomed to this, hero fear of death. No sort of economic system is really going to fix that. That's just more of a human problem than an economic problem, which I agree with.
Yeah, he was kind of tearing them down at the very end of the book. The utopians. I really liked when they were talking about how you can get rid of the fear of death by being immortal, like not being immortal, but being nearly immortal. Let's say you were supposed to live 1,000 years instead of 100. that it wouldn't be as big a deal. And he's like, no, like you live in constant fear because if you die at age 80 out of an accident or like a freak sickness, it's not 10 years of life lost. It's
Wait, yeah, here's a question I have for you. At what age of death do you think is the most tragic?
That's a good question. Tragic from like the perspective of the person who died or from the society?
Either.
Is the
I don't think you
most
can put a
tragic.
number on
I
it.
would say like I might have a bias, but like maybe your mid-20s. I don't know. I feel like it's like when you're. I'm gonna be careful here because I know you have like a 3-month-old.
You can say whatever you want. I mean, yeah.
Dying before you develop like a real personality for yourself is almost less tragic than like dying at 10 years old or something when
Yeah.
your parents like see like who you're becoming, like who you're going to become.
My theory is that the most tragic time of death is right before you're capable of reproducing, which is people have invested the most possible in you, and there hasn't been a chance for you to actualize on like to return on that investment. Like if I were to die, and I just had a kid, so if I were to die, it would suck, but like the family name would live on and all that.
You've done your duty.
Right, exactly. But if I were to die a year ago, I think that would be the most tragic. But that's my own opinion. Because yeah, I agree. If a 3-month-old, I'm gonna say this real quietly so nobody else in this house hears. But if a baby dies, you can make another. I mean, it's fucked up to say. It's fucked up to say, but I mean, it's the truth.
Oh, dude, if
I'm
you
actually like
study your...
leaning into
Yeah, lean into
Yeah.
his ear. Mike was saying softly just so you can get close to his son's ear.
What? Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong, definitely.
Mike, if you studied your family history at all.
Yeah, but like, doesn't this book kind of take laugh at all these immortality projects about like continued legacy and stuff like that? Like that's just like.
Well, I don't have much of an alternative. I mean, I agree that it certainly brings it to light, but I mean, yeah, I'm a monkey who's one step away from throwing poop at other people. I mean, I'm okay hearing the truth. I mean, I don't know. I guess I just don't view it as particularly upsetting to hear my own immortality project called into, under attack, or if I'm sorry, if that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, no. Well, that's like part of the thing is like the way he frames it in this book is that by having self-knowledge, we either have to, if we've actually like looked at that in the face without our character armor, we're just like in an absolute state of terror and despair. So by not like, I didn't feel terror and despair when I was reading this book. Like, was that just me repressing self-knowledge when it's like staring me in the face, like or stated plainly by this book, or do you think that you've actually like dealt with it and you're okay with it? Like, have you like, do you think you've really like understood your self-knowledge and managed it and figured it out, which is something that he's saying in this book that you can't really do. Like here, I really like the Kierkegaard chapter, which talked about it a lot, and he was saying like, yeah, there's all these ways that we think we deal with it, but we haven't. The really only way to deal with it is to like take a leap of faith, which I still don't entirely understand. When reading this book, did you think like, oh, this is a horror, or like, oh, I understand what they're saying, but I'm capable of moving past it?
What do you think, Nathan?
Oh, well, I mean, obviously I think it's just obvious that we have
I think Nathan's been trying to talk for a while and we haven't heard him.
I can hear him.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was actually thinking this is a good. I was like, oh shit, did they finally mute me? Because I thought it was great. Like I was getting to hear you were talking a lot more, bringing more into it. But I think that what's interesting is what's interesting about our culture now in the current like internet, thinking about when we were talking earlier about like fetishism and whatnot, it's just like how we can or how we seem to know it all but accept it. Like I forget if it was Mike or Eddie, you guys were talking about how the like death when you're fully when you watch a lot of like horror, watch a lot of like murder, like how in a certain way it like sublimates it. You sublimate it. You kind of like it allows you to repress it better.
Yeah, that's what we were saying earlier.
Yeah.
So the more you focus on death, the less of a negative effect it has on you.
Yeah, I feel like I've been getting the feeling that there's something about our culture and the fact that because we don't have a sense of collective immortality, because we're like all individuals, pursuing our like self-interest, I think Trump kind of exemplifies this best, because we don't really believe even in like America anymore, or like we just barely believe in it as like a larger thing that like we're a part of, this like larger project, like the way that like a soldier has no problem jumping on a grenade to save his fellows, because he believes that he's a part of something bigger than himself. and so it's fine to give up your own life for a higher cause.
Well, that part, oh yeah.
But yeah, we don't believe it anymore. We don't really. Our society doesn't believe it.
That part was kind of interesting to me about like the self-sacrifice of soldiers, because when going off to war, I think it was Becker that was saying you feel sad for the bastard next to you who's going to die, but then in the middle of war, it's you who jumps on the grenade. You didn't plan to jump on the grenade when you're going off to war. You didn't think you were going to die, but in the heat of the moment, it's you who gives up their life. So somewhere unconsciously, you must have been aware that you may be presented with this particular situation, and you must be protecting yourself against it by then putting it onto the person next to you by saying it's them who's going to be unfortunately having to jump on this grenade. But maybe that's not even true, because when the grenade falls, you don't wait for somebody to jump on it.
No, Mike, I think they're two different soldiers. I think there's one soldier, who's very much like similar to the author of the Hagakure, where it's like, no, you want to die, or like the Vikings, like you're not going to war to live, like you want glory.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's glory in death. There's immortality in death. And I just think there's a fundamental difference. I think the soldier who's like, oh yeah, they're not gonna, like, he's like, I'm not gonna die, like God's watching over me, individually, who just kind of unconsciously believes or consciously believes that, oh yeah, no, someone else will get hit, but I'm gonna make it through. Like I don't think that person will necessarily have the same resolve, because like you have to make a choice. You can't just automatically jump on a grenade, you're gonna die. Like that's.
But isn't that what that thought experiment illustrates? Is that it is literally a choice that you make without having made it ahead of time?
I feel like you have to be you have to build yourself into the kind of person who would. Like I don't think you can just.
Right. Well, I wouldn't.
That way.
I wouldn't. Would you?
I don't know. Well, see, right as I am, I wouldn't go to war.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I wish I had a cause that I would. I wish I am jealous.
Even though it results in your death?
Yeah, no, I would love to have
like a jihad
that's bigger than, like he was talking about the neurotics during the French Revolution, how like all the neurotics left the asylum.
Oh, yeah.
Because they found a heroic thing. Like I felt like, amen, brothers,
Yeah. But I mean, I don't know. Isn't it from I don't know, from a calculated point of view though? What you're doing is you're saying, I feel like you're putting it into fifth gear. You're burning all the gas real quick to flame out in some glorious. What you're doing is looking to there's this great quote in Hamilton, that musical where like,
oh God,
have you seen it?
No, I've just listened to a little bit.
It's Hamilton. Hamilton's looking to
me.
Oh, it's offensive. Okay, well, prepare to be offended. Hamilton is looking to basically die in war and achieve glory, and Washington says something like, "You're looking to be a martyr. Well, dying is easy. Living is harder." And I guess I just sort of take umbrage with this, that we, on one hand, try to preserve our lives, and that we're constantly, calculating and optimizing and looking for the best ways in which to live. And at the same time, we're professing that we're looking for this glorious way to die, this righteous cause, this jihad to let ourselves be taken by, to give our lives meaning, even though it means, having the candle burn out that much more quickly. And I just feel like, just by virtue of the way that we live our lives, all that is a platitude, because clearly we don't actually feel that way. It's more of a way that we want to feel.
Some people feel that way, right?
Yeah, the ones in Saudi Arabia. Do you guys have anything else that you want to bring up about the book?
Oh, well, can I just add, I just wanted to say that, in the sense, like you were talking about repression and, or in the utopian. And I just, in kind of in this vein, God, how to say it? Yeah, I think repression is not, that was one part where I kind of lost, Marcuse lost me, I agree with his formulation of some of the problems our society has, but not, saying how do you call it, free to do whatever you want is not right either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny that we want freedom, even though we know getting complete freedom is not better.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel the desire to be a part of something bigger. I just can't stand the biggerness that America is currently.
Mm-hmm.
I really would have. It would have been great to have been a soldier
or a Christian.
Yeah, yeah, if I could believe in it, I really wish I could. I wish I could go along with that group, in that way, but it just.
Or some sort of German in the 30s.
Oh yeah, dude, Mike, that would have rocked. That would have just been. That would have been a lot of fun,
Well, sometimes you just
the
you miss out.
Getting after it.
Born into the wrong century. I'm sorry to say.
Yeah.
Or
hey man, be the change you want to see in the world.
No, that's the problem, man. We want an authentic project, but we can't just go along with whatever is presented.
Hey, what do you guys want to read for next time? I can throw out a couple of suggestions, or if anybody has some ideas, we could look at those.
Yeah, I'll preface by saying that, like, depending on what we read, I might either have to sit one out or only read part of it like I usually do. I've been pretty overwhelmed lately.
Yeah.
I can't imagine how you're reading this much and, like, taking care of a kid, Michael.
Yeah, and I'm going back to work in a week, or on Monday, so that's going to be a thing too.
You got to go back in?
Till the end of
your meat?
Till the end of the year, and then I'm off again for a little bit. Well, what I was going to recommend, and I know it's kind of coming back to a person that we've already read, but was Nietzsche's Antichrist, which is less than 100 pages. We're pretty familiar with Nietzsche. Nathan, I know you and I have both read Twilight of the Idols.
I would give it a shot. Was that one of the ones he wrote when he was, like, half insane?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty late.
Last ones.
I think
it's pretty much just a critique of Christianity, right? From the parts I've read so far.
It looks like it from Wikipedia, yeah. Or I'll throw out a couple other suggestions. There's a section from Kierkegaard, because I know Kierkegaard was pretty big in this book. Kierkegaard's Either Or. There's a chapter called The Seducer's Diary, which, if I remember, kind of stands on its own and could be read, and it's probably about 50 or 60 pages. And then there's also...
Or The Sickness Unto Death.
Yeah, how long is that?
Oh, I forget. I was planning on reading that eventually.
Yeah, I'd like to read that too. But there's this book by Zizek, How to Read Lacan, if we want to stay in the psychoanalytic thing. But this might be pretty dense because Lacan is notoriously hard to get through.
I was wondering if you guys would be interested in reading Worm at the Core at all.
Oh, by that Solomon?
Sheldon Solomon. Yeah, just in terms of like putting to the degree that he I mean, it's more like your kind of experimental psychology that you'd get in like most like psych books, I think, just kind of summarizing a bunch of different research in kind of drawing a common thread between. 288
pages. I feel like I'd love to read this, but I'd really want to read a short one in between just to get a quick win in. But would that be okay if we did a quick diversion?
Oh yeah. No. I just was thinking. For me, that was seeming like a next. What else was I thinking about?
I was
almost thinking.
Yeah. Go ahead.
What's up, Eddie? No. Go.
Oh, I'm saying. So I like the first two of your picks, Mike. Like, I would read definitely for sure either of those. I was also thinking we could always read like just an essay, like even like a more modern essay.
Yep.
From like the last 20 or 30, maybe 40 years. That could be a good quick one. But also, I'm totally fine with the Antichrist or Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard is actually my favorite chapter, I think, in this book. Talking about the psychoanalyst.
Okay, then why don't we do the
Kierkegaard?
What's that?
That was a good chapter. I did like that a lot.
I skipped that one.
Just because I don't know anything else.
I read Either Or a long time ago. But Seducer's Diary, if we want to do that one, is how many pages is this? It's over 100. It's 130 or so. But I mean, we could do that. I think it reads pretty quickly. What if you guys pick between Nietzsche and Kierkegaard? What would your preference be?
Nathan, that's up to you.
Damn, I was hoping you'd decide.
I guess my leaning is toward Kierkegaard, but I would read the Antichrist.
Okay, let's do.
I'm leaning towards Kierkegaard too.
Okay.
Just because I feel like I don't know. I read a bunch of Nietzsche when we were going through it, including the Antichrist. And the Antichrist, it was just kind of like it felt rehashed. Like I feel like Twilight of the Idols is far more interesting.
Okay, let's do.
Or even Beyond Good and Evil. Like if we were to do more Nietzsche, but I almost feel like we got it, Or I felt like I got it at least.
Yeah, let's do Kierkegaard then.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. It's 7:00. I'm gonna end the recording.
Cool.
All right.
Great talk, you guys.